Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here. This is exciting. This is the 6th-month birthday of the channel. To celebrate that birthday and the fun that we've had around the way, I'm going back to revisiting the Iceberg series of Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things by Juan the Pickle. This is the 5th tier of that iceberg, and let's get spooky. Before we get going on the video, let's make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. That is The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Go ahead and share this video to Elon Musk. Email him a link to this video as part of his, what did you do last week request. Say, yeah, I watched a bunch of videos from this guy, Kenny. Or you could tweet at him, or I don't know, send him letters in the mail. Just send this to Elon, see what Elon thinks. Again, this is tier 5 of the Iceberg series. The Kamar Dobin Incident. The Kamar Dobin Incident is an event that occurred in the Kamar Dobin Mountains of Siberia, Russia, in August 1993. It's often compared to the Dyatlov Pass Incident due to its similarities with the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Here's what happened. On August 5th, 1993, on the Kamar Dobin mountain range in Siberia, near Lake Baikal, a group of 7 student hikers from Kazakhstan, led by an experienced hiker, were on a hike. During their hike, 6 of the 7 hikers died suddenly and under bizarre circumstances. The sole survivor, Valentina Udachenko, described disturbing symptoms in her companions, including bleeding from the eyes and ears, foaming at the mouth, convulsions, violent behavior, including tearing at the clothes and banging heads against rock. The official explanation and autopsy concluded that the cause of death for the 5 hikers were hypothermia, and for their leader, Korovina, it was a heart attack. Malnutrition was listed as a contributing factor. However, this explanation has been widely questioned due to the survivor's account and the seemingly rapid and violent nature of their death. Due to discrepancies between the official explanation and described events, many alternative theories have emerged, including infrasound, caused either by wind or geographic activity, potentially leading to panic or irrational behavior. A military experiment involving nerve agents. Speculation about a secret military experiment gone wrong or exposure to nerve agents possibly explaining the described symptom. Contaminated water. Lake Baikal is known to have pollution issues, and contaminated water sources could have played a role. Mushroom poison. The group may have accidentally consumed poisonous or hallucinogenic mushroom. Like the Dyatlov Pass incident, the Kamar Dobin incident involves unexplained deaths of hikers in the same region of Russia, and unsettling circumstances and a lack of definitive explanation. To this day, the exact cause of the Kamar Dobin incident remains a mystery, fueling speculation and conspiracy theory. Now, I've talked about the Dyatlov Pass incident before. My opinion on this particular incident is this is probably some sort of environmental or poisoning factor, right? There's obviously something in the environment that caused these people to react to this way and to die suddenly. So I think a lot of the explanations make sense, whether it's, some sort of pollution or some sort of poisoning or some sort of contaminant that caused this sort of issue. Lasagna Cat. Lasagna Cat is a surreal and unsettling web series created by Michael Barrett. It's known for its bizarre and distorted takes on the Garfield comic strip. The core of Lasagna Cat is a reinterpretation of the Garfield comic strip. Barrett takes Garfield comics and transforms them into something completely different, often disturbing, and always bizarre. Lasagna Cat is characterized by its surreal and absurdist humor. It plays with expectations, often subverting them in unsettling and darkly comedic ways. It's essentially a surrealist art project involving Garfield. And fortunately for us, we can watch it on YouTube.
I think I'll put that dog's lights out.
Lasagna Cat episodes use a wide range of media. You'll see live action segments featuring actors portraying Garfield characters in these bizarre scenarios. Crude and intentionally distorted animation styles. Found footage and stock footage incorporated to create disjointed visual. And a crucial element to the videos is the sound design, using unsettling sound effects, distorted audio, and music to enhance the bizarre atmosphere. While each episode is unique, some recurring themes include body horror, disturbing transformations and manipulations of the Garfield character's body, existential dread, There's a sense of unease that permeates all of the episode. Nonsense and non sequiturs, logic and narrative structure are often abandoned in favor of bizarre and random events. Lasagna Cat was conceived as a deconstruction of the wholesome and family-friendly Garfield comic, exposing a darker and more settling undercurrent. Lasagna Cat is essentially a cult internet series that takes Garfield and twists it into something deeply strange, often unsettling, and darkly funny. The Pink Panther robberies. The Pink Panther robberies refer to a series of jewelry heists carried out by a loosely connected international network of criminals primarily out of Yugoslavia, primarily out of the former Yugoslavia. They earned the nickname Pink Panthers from British investigators after a 2003 London robbery where a stolen diamond ring was found hidden in a jar of face cream, reminiscent from the scene of the 1963 movie The Pink Panther. The Pink Panthers were not a single organization, but rather a network of individuals, smaller groups operating across multiple countries, primarily in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And they're known for their meticulous planning, speed, and a little bit of a theatrical flair. Their robberies often involve careful reconnaissance, extensive planning, and surveillance of target location. They're fast execution of the robberies, which are often carried out in broad daylight and completed within minutes. And they involve specialized roles like drivers, lookouts, and those who actually do the dirty work. The robberies involve dramatic entrances and exits, sometimes using vehicles to smash windows or create diversions, and clean getaways, leaving little trace and quickly disappearing after the heist. They primarily target high-end jewelry stores and boutiques, stealing diamonds, gemstones, watches, and other luxury goods. And the Pink Panthers are estimated to be responsible for hundreds of robberies and billions of dollars in stolen goods over the last several decades. Many members are believed to have roots in the Balkans, particularly Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia. Some are thought to have backgrounds in the military or paramilitary group. Despite numerous arrests and international law enforcement efforts, the Pink Panthers remain active, though perhaps in a less centralized and more fragmented form. So these guys got away with it. I know, I think that heists are pretty rare these days, so it's pretty fascinating when we find out that people are committing heists. And it's even more fascinating when these people are able to avoid capture. So I don't know. Obviously stealing is bad, and robberies are bad, but it's sort of fascinating that this group is able to do this and has not been caught, or at least has not been caught on a large scale. The Putney Street Jogger. The Putney Street Jogger refers to an incident that occurred on the Putney Bridge in London, England on May 5th, 2017. Here's what happened. A male jogger was running across the Putney Bridge and pushed a woman into the path of oncoming traffic. The victim was a 33-year-old woman named Lucia Brugger. She was walking across the bridge when she was shoved into the road. A bus narrowly avoided hitting Brugger, swerving at the last moment. She sustained minor injuries, but was incredibly lucky to escape more serious harm or death. After pushing her, the jogger continued running without stopping or checking on the woman. He then returned across the bridge about 15 minutes later and was confronted by the victim, but he ignored her and kept running. The incident was captured on CCTV and released by the Metropolitan Police. It sparked widespread public outrage and a police investigation to identify the jogger. The CCTV footage went viral, and the search for the Putney Bridge jogger became a major news story. After a public appeal and investigation, the jogger was identified as Simon Gao. He was eventually charged and convicted of grievous bodily harm. In July 2018, he was sentenced to community service and ordered to pay compensation to the victim. The lenient sentence obviously caused further controversy. God claimed it was an accident and that he didn't see Brugger. However, the CCTV footage appeared to show a deliberate shove, and many people found his explanation and lack of remorse unconvincing. His motive is unclear, and the incident is often seen as a disturbing act of unprovoked violence. Personally, I think that this guy is a pretty bad person. He was probably acting on some sort of bizarre impulse to hurt somebody, and the fact that he got away with this without getting any further punishment or treatment is pretty problematic. And the fact that this guy is still out there is disturbing. The Westfield Watcher. The Westfield Watcher refers to a case that occurred in Westfield, New Jersey, starting in 2014. It involved a family that bought a house and were terrorized by anonymous letters from someone calling themselves the Watcher. The Broadus family, Derek and Maria Broadus, bought a house in Westfield, New Jersey for $1.3 million. They intended to move there with their 3 children. Shortly after purchasing the house, the Broadus family started receiving anonymous handwritten letters addressed to the new owner, and later specifically naming them. The letters were threatening. The letters were signed by the Watcher and claimed that the house had been watched by the writer's family for decades and generations. The letters became increasingly personal and menacing, expressing an obsessive interest in the Broadus family, especially their children. Some excerpts include, 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday. I've been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Do you need the house to fill with young blood? I requested. Better for me. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in every one. Look at all the windows you can see. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. The Broaddus family became increasingly terrified and never moved into the house. They contacted police and hired private investigators to discover who was writing these letters. The previous owners, the Woods family, admitted to receiving one letter from the Watcher shortly before moving out, but they said they dismissed it as a prank. Despite extensive investigations, including DNA analysis, interviews with neighbors, and even involving the FBI, the Watcher has never been identified. The Broaddus family sued the previous owners for failing to disclose the letter they had received, and they eventually sold the house at a significant loss in 2019. Even after the sale, the identity of the Watcher remains unknown, and the case is still a subject of fascination and speculation. I imagine this is either some creepy neighbor or someone attached to the property in some way. It might even be the previous owner. Now, there is a Netflix movie or a Netflix series that was loosely based on the Watcher called The Watcher. And you can go watch that if you're more interested in this story. Nor Amaya. Nor Amaya was a 38-year-old restaurateur in Washington, D.C. who co-owned an Italian restaurant called Coppies with her brother. She was found dead in her apartment on November 2nd, 2009 after being strangled. To this day, the murder is unsolved. Security footage shows her entering the apartment building on the night of her death after going out on Halloween, but did not reveal any suspect. Police have collected DNA evidence but have not found a match. Her brother believes the killer was someone she knew and that fears that person could still harm others. This is a sad case, and it's sad that she was taken from her family, and she, has loved ones who loved her, and it's a shame that they haven't been able to figure out who it is, who was involved. It's a tragedy. The Monster with 21 Faces. The Monster with 21 Faces, or the Jilkol Morinaga incident, was a series of blackmail and extortion crimes targeting Japanese confectionery companies that occurred in Japan, mostly in the Osaka area, from March 1984 until August 1985. It is one of Japan's most infamous unsolved cases, and it's known for the bizarre and theatrical nature and the intense media scrutiny and attention that it got. The primary targets were two major Japanese confectionery companies, Azaki Glico, which is famous for its Glico caramel candies, and Morinaga, which is another large confectionery company known for chocolates and other treats. On March 18, 1984, gunmen kidnapped Katsushi Azaki, the president of Azaki Glico, from his home. He was later released unharmed 3 days later after Glico reportedly paid a ransom to a go-between. Following the kidnapping, Glico began receiving threatening letters and phone calls from a group calling themselves the Monster with 21 Faces, a name taken from the popular Japanese detective fiction series by Edogawa Ranpo. The Monster demanded large sums of money from Glico, initially 1 billion yen, which was later reduced, and they threatened to poison Glico products if their demands were not met. Glico products were found to have been laced with sodium cyanide. This led to a massive public recall and widespread panic. Messages were left in the tampered products boasting about the poisonings. It would then be expanded to Morinaga and other companies. When Glico proved difficult to extort further, the Monster with 21 Faces shifted their focus to Morinaga in June 1984, using similar tactics and threats and product tampering. This caused significant economic damage and public fear in the Japanese food industry. Obviously, the Monster with 21 Faces was known for theatrical letters. The Monster sent taunting and boastful letters to the police and media, often written in a Japanese script for informal writing and signed with the Monster with 21 Faces name and a distinctive glove symbol. The letters often mocked the police for their inability to catch them and contained clues and riddles that were ultimately unhelpful. The Monster seemed to enjoy the public attention and public fear they were generating. The police launched a massive investigation involving thousands of officers and significant resources. A key piece of evidence was grainy surveillance footage of a man wearing a Yomiuri Giants baseball cap near a Morinaga product drop-off point. This person became known as the Fox-Eyed Man and was widely publicized in wanted posters and media reports. Initially, the police identified Manabu Miyazaki, the son of a known Yakuza boss and criminal himself, as the Fox-Eyed Man, and another figure known as the Videotape Man, based on witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. However, this identification was later dismissed due to lack of concrete proof and Miyazaka's strong alibi for the relevant period. After over a year of terror and extortion, the Monster of 21 Faces abruptly ceased communication. On August 7, 1985, the final letter was sent to the media declaring, "We're going to stop bullying the weak company." No further communications or activities from the Monster were ever definitively linked to the case. It's important to note that the statute of limitations for all of these crimes has since lapsed. These people could come out, I guess, and, say, hey, we did this, but, as a lot of this stuff works, they could possibly be charged with other things. I don't know. I don't know anything about the Japanese Chinese legal system. So I'm willing to bet that this was some sort of disgruntled employee. In fact, I would say it's almost certainly a disgruntled employee that was somehow involved, or, just someone else who had some sort of like problem that they wanted to take out on these companies. Sabrina and Ursula Eriksson are Swedish identical twin sisters who gained notoriety for a bizarre and disturbing incident that occurred in England in May 2008. Their case is frequently referred to as the M6 motorway incident or the Twin Sisters incident. Here's what happened. Sabrina and Ursula Eriksson were 40-year-old identical twins from Sweden. They were described as having a close but somewhat codependent relationship. Leading up to the incident, they had traveled to the UK and their behavior had become increasingly erratic and concerning. The twins were seen behaving strangely in Liverpool, including refusing to pay for a bus ticket and clinging to bus staff. Police were called, but they were later released. Later that day, they were observed walking along the central reservation of the M6 motorway near Stoke-on-Trent. This is a dangerous and illegal act. Their presence on the motorway caused significant traffic disruption as vehicles swerved to avoid them. Police and highway officials arrived on the scene to try and remove them from the motorway for their own safety. However, the twins became increasingly agitated and resistant. In the footage captured by traffic camera news, Ursula ran directly into the path of a passing truck. She was struck and seriously injured, losing consciousness. Sabrina then also ran into traffic directly in front of a car. She was hit and thrown into the air, but remained conscious. Even after being hit by the vehicles, their behavior continued as police and paramedics tried to assist them. Sabrina attacked a police officer who was trying to help her, punching her in the face. Ursula, despite her severe injuries, also became aggressive and had to be restrained. Both sisters were eventually arrested and taken into custody. Both sisters were hospitalized for their injuries. Ursula's injuries were more severe due to the truck impact. Sabrina Eriksson was charged with assault and obstructing a police officer. She was released from court without a full psychiatric evaluation after pleading guilty to these charges. She was sentenced to 1 day in prison, time served, as she had been in custody prior to the incident. It's unclear what Ursula's sentencing was. Her injuries were more serious, and it's likely she remained hospitalized for a longer period. However, I have not been able to determine whether she had pled guilty or was immediately released. Just days after the motorway incident, on May 19th, 2008, after Sabrina was released from custody, she encountered a 54-year-old man named Glenn Hollinshead, who was a former plasterer and had been trying to overcome alcohol addiction. Out of kindness, he offered her a free place to stay in his home in Fenton. Later the day, Sabrina Eriksson stabbed Glenn Hollinshead to death with a kitchen knife in his home. After the stabbing, Sabrina fled the house armed with a knife and a hammer. She was seen hitting herself on the head with the hammer. She was eventually rearrested after being tasered by the police. Sabrina was charged with the murder of Glenn Hollinshead. However, at her trial in 2009, she pled guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. A key aspect of her defense was shared psychosis, suggesting that she was influenced by her twin sister Ursula, suffering from a shared mental disorder at the time of the killing. This was accepted by the court. Sabrina Eriksson was sentenced to 5 years in prison for manslaughter. Now, this is sort of a bizarre case, and it really makes you question why she wasn't evaluated psychologically before she was released, especially afterwards when she was able to use a insanity type defense or a psychosis defense to avoid first-degree murder or intentional murder charge. And sadly, because of the fact that they did not undergo a complete psychiatric evaluation, a man died. It goes to show you just, mental health is important and mental health isn't taken seriously. And had this person, had their condition looked at in a more serious way, it probably could have saved a life. The Mongolian death worm. The Mongolian death worm is a creature that supposedly inhabits the southern Gobi Desert in Mongolia. It's a cryptid. It's commonly described as worm-like, thick as a human arm, and around 2 to 5 feet long. It's described as reddish-brown in color and sometimes with spikes or bark. It supposedly lives in sandy areas of the Gobi Desert. The death worm moniker comes from the claims that it can kill from a distance, often attributed to spitting acid or venom. Some accounts claim it spits a corrosive substance that can kill instantly. Other stories suggest it can generate a lethal electric shock. It moves underground and sometimes emerges from the surface. This sounds like Tremor. Stories of dangerous worm-like creatures have been part of Mongolian nomadic culture for centuries, part of Mongolian folklore for centuries. These tales are passed down orally and are deeply embedded in local folklore. Western interest in the Mongolian deathworm was largely sparked by an American explorer named Roy Chapman Andrews in his 1926 book On the Trail of the Ancient Man. While he didn't claim to have seen it, he documented local Mongolian beliefs in a similar creature. There is no scientific evidence supporting the existence of this creature despite numerous expeditions and searches by cryptozoologists and adventurers over the years, and no credible scientific evidence of the Mongolian's deathworm's existence has ever been found. There are no verified photographs or videos of living Mongolian deathworm. No physical specimens of the Mongolian deathworm have ever been captured or examined by scientists. Now, this thing sounds pretty gross. It sounds pretty terrifying. And, like with most cryptids, it becomes part of folklore. Does this thing exist? It's possible. Is it likely? Very likely possible that it's just a misidentification of some sort of snake or some sort of worm or, some sort of hallucinations while being in the desert. Argleton. Argleton refers to a village that appeared on Google Maps and other online mapping services in 2009. It became an online mystery. In September 2009, people noticed a village named Argleton appearing on Google Maps in the United Kingdom. It was located in a rural area west of Lancashire, England, between the villages of Auten and Iceberg. Despite appearing on the map, Argleton doesn't actually exist, and there are no buildings, roads, or any signs of a village at the location indicated on the map. The area was just farmland. The appearance of this non-existent village sparked online fascination. Why was it on the map? Who created it? What was its purpose? Various theories have emerged to explain Argleton's premise. One popular theory was that Argleton was a cartographic copyright trap or a paper town. Map makers sometimes intentionally insert fictional places to detect copyright infringement. If a competitor copies their map and includes the fake place, it's evidence of plagiarism. It could also just be data entry error. Perhaps someone accidentally created a location with a fake name. Other people believe that it's a prank or a joke by someone with access to mapping data. I think those are all reasonable explanations. I think the fact that it appeared on Google Maps is likely makes it that it was a prank because, Google, those Google developers are always sort of creating jokes out there. They've got jokes, they've got pranks. So it should be noted, however, that Google has never given a detailed explanation for how it happened or who was responsible for adding this town to the map. They did acknowledge the existence of Argleton on their map, and then they removed it. Martin Lorello. Martin Lorello was a sideshow performer best known as the Human Owl, or Bobby the Boy with the Revolving Head. His unique act involved his ability to rotate his head 180 degrees backwards. Ooh. He could turn his head completely backwards, allowing him to face directly behind him while his body faced forward. This was a physical anomaly, not an illusion. He toured extensively with sideshows and circuses, most notably Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Ringling Brothers. His act was a major draw to its bizarre and visually striking nature. He was billed as the human owl because of his owl-like ability to rotate his head. The name emphasized the unusual and animalistic aspect of his performance. There is no known medical explanation available why he was able to do this. However, it's likely that Lorella had some form of anatomical anomaly in his neck vertebrae, ligaments, or muscles that allowed this extreme range of motion. It's important to note that such extreme rotation would be impossible for most people and even dangerous. He immigrated to the United States in the early 20th century and spent much of his performing career in America. He achieved considerable fame and recognition during this time as a sideshow performer, becoming a well-known figure in popular culture. His image and story continues to be circulated in books and online content about unusual human abilities and sideshow history. Martin died in 1955. Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov was a Soviet Navy officer who is credited with preventing a potential nuclear catastrophe during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, Arkhipov was serving as a flotilla chief of staff on board the Soviet submarine B-59, a diesel-powered submarine armed with nuclear torpedoes. In October 1962, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were extremely high due to the placement of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba. The U.S. Navy was enforcing a naval blockade around Cuba, and Soviet submarines were attempting to break through. The B-59 was operating in the Atlantic near Cuba, and it was detected by the U.S. Navy and surrounded by destroyers. 3 U.S. destroyers began dropping practice-depth charges, non-explosive, to force the submarine to surface and identify itself. Inside the cramped and overheated submarine, communication with Moscow had been lost. The submarine's captain, Valentin Savitsky, believed that war might have already broken out and became increasingly agitated. They ordered the nuclear torpedo to be prepared for firing. The standard Soviet procedure at the time required the launch of a nuclear weapon, required the agreement of 3 officers on board, the captain, the political officer, and the flotilla chief of staff. Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. He argued against it and eventually convinced Savitsky to surface the submarine and await orders from Moscow. Had Arkhipov not intervened and the B-59 launched its nuclear torpedo, likely against a U.S. Navy vessel, it could have triggered a devastating escalation, potentially leading to a full-scale nuclear war between the U.S. and Soviet Union. Soviets widely believe he prevented a global catastrophe. It's sort of incredible that this guy had an incredible role in sort of saving the world from nuclear disaster, and that he's relatively unknown. One of those sort of neat little history tidbits that happened during this bizarre time of the Cold War. Sir Adrian Carton de Weert was a Belgian-born British Army officer who is famous for his extraordinary courage, spanning multiple conflicts from the Second Boer War to World War II. He's described as a real-life action man due to his numerous injuries and unwavering determination. He was born into an aristocratic Belgian family in 1880, joined the British Army in 1899 to fight the Second Boer War. He served in World War I and was involved in heavy fighting and sustained horrific injuries. He lost an eye. He was shot in the face in 1914 during the Second Battle of Ypres, losing his left eye. He supposedly tore off his dangling eye himself when a doctor refused to remove it immediately. He lost his left hand during an accident in Flanders. He was severely wounded and lost his left hand. He would suffer other injuries throughout World War I. He remained in the army after World War I, serving in various roles. In World War II, despite his age and earlier injuries, he was recalled to active duty and was involved in fighting in Norway, and later placed his head as the British military mission to Poland and then Yugoslavia. He was even captured as a prisoner of war by the Italians during World War II, but escaped. After World War II, he served in diplomatic roles, including Winston Churchill's personal representative to China. He lived to the age of 83, dying in 1963, having witnessed and participated in some of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century. What a wild story. See, I think after the first time I got hurt, I would be done with the military. Well, I wouldn't join the military anyway because I'm not cut out for that. But this guy just kept going back for more. Edwin Arthur Coward, Roy P. Lucas, Bjorn Giever Bergeson, Truls Hellevik, and William Kamra. These 5 individuals are connected by a tragic event: the Amina's hostage crisis in Algeria in January 2013. They were all employees of the energy company Statoil and were among those killed during the terrorist attack. The only confirmed case of death by a meteorite. So this is sort of crazy, that there's only been one confirmed case of death directly by a meteorite, and it occurred in the Kurdish region of Iraq on August 22nd, 1888. There are multiple documents found in the General Directorate of State Archives of the Presidency of the Republic of Turkey claiming that a meteorite hit and killed one man while paralyzing another. The West Mesa Bone Collector. The West Mesa murders are a series of unsolved murders in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where the remains of 11 women and a fetus were discovered buried in a mass grave on the West Mesa of Albuquerque between 2009 and 2010. The case is unsolved and is one of New Mexico's most notorious mysteries. In February 2009, the skeletal remains of a woman were found during a dog training exercise in a remote area of the West Mesa. Their discovery led to a large-scale excavation of the site. Over the following months, authorities unearthed the remains of 11 women and one fetus from the 92-acre area of desert on the West Mesa. The victims were identified as women who had gone missing between 2001 and 2005. They were primarily from marginalized communities in Albuquerque and had backgrounds that included prostitution, drug addiction, poverty. Most of the victims were of Hispanic ethnicity. The exact causes of the death for all victims could not be determined due to the skeletal nature of the remains and the passage of time. However, in some cases where it could be determined, the cause of death were ruled as homicide. The timeline of disappearances, which occurred in a cluster between 2001 and 2005, suggests a serial killer or killers were operating during this time frame and responsible for these victims. Also, the profile of the victims, the fact that they're from marginalized communities, they were vulnerable as sex workers, and individuals struggled with addiction, also suggests that this was the work of a serial killer. The Albuquerque Police Department launched a massive investigation, including local, state, and federal agencies. They pursued thousands of leads, interviewed numerous individuals, and collected DNA evidence. Despite the extensive investigation, no suspects have ever been definitively identified and charged in connection with the West Mesa murders. Several persons of interest have been investigated and ruled out, but the case remains unsolved. I think this is very likely a serial killer. And, it's very likely that this serial killer is still out there. And, serial killers often wait dormant for periods of time. So it could be that this serial killer starts attacking people again. So this is pretty scary. Pretty scary if you're in the Albuquerque region, or actually anywhere, because he could get up and move somewhere, right? Missing Thunderbird photo. Now, we talked about the Thunderbird before, which is a gigantic bird, right? There is supposedly a lost photograph from the late 1800s depicting this gigantic bird essentially crucified to the interior wall of side of a barn. The size of the bird was demonstrated by 6 men that had stood with their arms outstretched, fingertip to fingertip, in front of it to measure its wingspan. This photograph is said to have been printed in a frontier newspaper called Tombstone Epitaph in 1890. The issue is archived and viewable online. However, there is no photo, but there is indeed a story about a huge flying creature. Now, this is one of those things that sort of strike me as like a false memory or urban legend type situation, right? This photograph totally existed, but now it's gone from everywhere. But of course, it's also totally possible that in this time period, there were photos that showed extraordinary things that are just gone. Photographs don't last very long. And if they weren't taken care of and they weren't preserved properly, they would be gone. So I'm going to put this in a probable, not real thing, but certainly could be. Captain Cutchy's key lime pie. There is a legend surrounding Captain Cutchy's key lime pie. It is a unusual phenomenon in online comments where there are hundreds and hundreds of internet comments talking about how great Captain Cutchy's key lime pie is. And the weird thing is this is across all sorts of online platforms. It's reviewed or discussed on social media, food blogs, review sites, and even general forums. And it goes beyond its typical "this is good" language. There's hyperbolic and exaggerated comments like "best key lime pie ever," "life-changing," "perfect," "transcendental." Certain phrases or ideas seem to recur in the comments, creating a sense of shared experience or an inside joke among those who have tried the pie. Now, I think the explanation here is there's some sort of bot or AI that sort of got out of control and just sort of posts these comments. If you see how similar the language is in a lot of these comments, it's very similar. And then I'm sure that as this mystery sort of took off, people started copycatting it and making their own Cutchy's key lime pie statements. It's still a fun and bizarre mystery. Soku Shinbutsu is a Japanese term referring to Buddhist monks who practice self-mummification and are considered living Buddhas or Buddhas in their very body. It's an extremely rare practice associated with the Shingon school of Buddhism in Japan. Shoku Shinbutsu is considered the ultimate form of self-sacrifice in some Buddhist tradition. Monks who undertake this practice aim to achieve enlightenment and Buddhahood in their current lifetime through this rigorous and prolonged process of self-mummification. Sounds uncomfortable. The process of becoming Shaku Shinbutsu is demanding, and it takes years, sometimes decades, to complete. It's a gradual and deliberate process of preparing the body for mummification while still alive. Typically involves 3 phases, each lasting approximately 3 years. The first phase, detoxification. The monks would drastically alter their diet, eliminating fat from their bodies. They would consume a very restricted diet of nuts, seeds, and berries found in mountains. This phase was designed to reduce body fat and moisture, the key factors to preventing decomposition after death. Desiccation. The diet then becomes even more bizarre, consisting of mainly bark and roots. This continues to reduce body fat and dehydrates the body. Toward the end of this phase, monks would start drinking a tea made from urushi sap, which is highly toxic. This caused vomiting and other fluid loss. But most important, it was intended to poison the body and make it less attractive to insects and bacteria after death, which is supposed to aid in the preservation. The final stage is encasement and entombment. When the monk felt like they were near death, they would enter a specifically prepared stone tomb, barely larger than their body, in a seated lotus position. A bamboo air tube would be provided for minimal oxygen, and a bell was placed inside. Each day, the monk would ring the bell to signal that they were still alive. When the bell stopped ringing, it was assumed the monk had died, and the tomb would be sealed completely. Years later, the tomb would be opened. If the body was successfully mummified, meaning it hadn't decomposed but remained preserved, the monk was considered to have achieved Soku Shinbutsu and was venerated as a living Buddha, except they're no longer alive. The Soku Shinbutsu process was extremely difficult, and very few monks successfully achieved self-mummification. It's estimated that only a few dozen Shoku Shinbutsu are known to exist in Japan, mostly in temples in the Yamagata prefecture. Many monks who attempted the process died during the process, and their bodies decomposed normally. Only those who successfully mummified were considered Shoku Shinbutsu. I realize this is a religious thing. This sounds a lot like bizarre self-harm to me, but you can take it however you want. Some people find this to be incredible self-sacrifice, and some people consider this to be crazy. The practice of Shoku Shinbutsu is no longer actively practiced in the same rigorous way. And that's probably a good thing. It's probably not good to unalive yourself in this very drawn out and painful way. It's not good to unalive yourself in any way, but this sounds particularly torturous. The expanding Earth theory. The expanding Earth theory is a fringe scientific theory that proposes that the Earth has been continuously increasing in radius throughout its history, and that the continents were once joined together on a much smaller globe, covering its entire significance. This is contrary to the widely accepted scientific consensus of plate tectonics and continental drift on a planet with a relatively constant radius. Here's what the expanding Earth theory is. The central tenet is that the Earth is constantly growing in size. Proponents suggest that the Earth's radius was significantly smaller in the past, perhaps even half its current size. They argue that the continents, when placed on a smaller globe, fit together much more neatly than they do in the current sized Earth. This is presented as an alternative explanation for the jigsaw puzzle fit of continents that is explained by plate tectonics. Expanding Earth proponents often reinterpret seafloor spreading, the creation of new oceanic mid-ocean ridges, not as evidence of plate movement on a constant radius Earth, but as direct evidence of the Earth's expansion in itself. Some proponents attempt to explain the expansion by suggesting changes in fundamental constants like gravity, or by postulating exotic matter being created within the Earth. The expanding Earth theory is overwhelmingly rejected by mainstream scientists, and it's considered pseudoscience or a fringe theory. Plate tectonics is a well-established and extensively supported theory that explains the large-scale motions of the Earth's lithosphere. There's also a wealth of other evidence against a significantly expanding Earth. For example, precise GPS and geodetic measurements show that the Earth's radius is not currently increasing at a rate that would be consistent with the expanding Earth theory. In fact, measurements show the Earth's radius is remarkably stable. Yeah, I think this is just another one of those ideas, kind of like the same as flat Earth theory, that, you know, some people get stuck on and obsess over and no one else really considers to be real. Lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is a state of consciousness where you become aware that you're dreaming while you are still asleep. In a lucid dream, you not only know you are dreaming, but you can often gain some control over the dream's content, characters, and environment. The defining characteristic is the realization within the dream itself that this is a dream. This awareness can range from a fleeting thought to complete and stable understanding that your currently reality is a dream. There are different ways in which people can control the dream. You know, you may simply be able to choose what you do or say within the dream, or slightly alter the environment. Though some claim to experience lucid dreams where they exert significant control, changing the dream scene, summoning characters, flying, or manipulating the dream narrative. Lucid dreams are often reported to be exceptionally vivid, clear, and realistic, sometimes even more so than waking reality. Emotions in lucid dreams can also be more intense and real feel. This can be both positive, like joy and excitement, and negative, fear, anxiety, sadness. Lucid dreams are typically remembered more clearly and vividly than non-lucid dreams. Lucid dreaming is associated with a hybrid state of consciousness, blending both aspects of REM sleep and wakefulness. The specific brain regions associated with self-awareness and higher order of cognitive functions become more active during lucid dreaming. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Waking Life, but it covers the whole concept of lucid dreamings pretty significantly. It talks about things like reality check. Regularly performing reality tests in waking life to question if you are dreaming can carry over into your dream. You know, checking a clock, pinching yourself, looking in a mirror, attempting to fly or float. I know that I've experienced lucid dreaming before, or at least I feel like I have. And it's a neat concept, kind of a weird brain hack, right? Astral projection. Astral projection is the ability to voluntarily leave one's physical body and travel in an astral body to different planes of existence. It's a concept that's found in various spiritual and esoteric traditions, as well as popular culture. The core concepts of astral projection is the idea that humans possess a subtle, non-physical body called the astral body, or the light body. This body is believed to be an energetic duplicate of the physical body, but made of a finer, non-material substance. Astral projection involves consciously separating the astral body from the physical body. This separation is often described as feeling like floating, drifting, or rising out of one's physical form. Once separated, the astral body is said to be able to travel to the astral plane, a non-physical realm believed to exist beyond our ordinary physical reality. The plane is often described as having different dimensions or levels and may be populated by various entities, spirits, or landscapes. During astral projection, consciousness is believed to reside in the astral body, allowing for experiences and perceptions independent of physical sentence. Proponents claim to be able to see, hear, and interact with the astral plane environment. Astral projection is usually described as a temporary separation. The astral body is said to remain connected to the physical body by a silver cord and can return at will, or automatically when the experience ends. This is sort of one of those concepts where you think of yourself as levitating or leaving your body, and it comes down to spiritual, right? Are you able to transcend your physical body in a sense, or quite literally transcend your physical body? It's certainly an interesting concept, but I think a lot of it has to do with just sort of the power of the brain and the way the brain can make you believe that you are doing something, even if that thing is not necessarily happening. I think a lot of this astral projection is focused on your brain, your mind, convincing itself that you're doing that. Jack Churchill. Sir John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill, also known as Jack Churchill and sometimes as Fighting Jack Churchill or Mad Jack, was a British Army officer who's famed for his daring exploits and unconventional warfare style during World War II. He's become a legendary figure, particularly known for carrying a longbow, bagpipes, and a Scottish broadsword into battle. Churchill was born in 1906, working as a newspaper editor and male model before rejoining the British Army in 1926. Churchill's World War II service began in Norway during the German invasion in 1940. As part of the British Expeditionary Force, he and his unit ambushed a German patrol near Lillesand. It's widely reported that he gave the signal to attack by killing a German sergeant with a longbow and arrow. This is often cited as the last recorded instance of a British soldier killing an enemy with a longbow in combat. Churchill volunteered for the commandos and participated in numerous daring raids and operations throughout the war. He served with No. 2 Commando and later No. 3 Commando. He became known for his longbow and sword. He believed it was important for an officer to be distinct and lead from the front. While the longbow kill in Norway is widely reported, he did carry the bow and sword throughout the war. However, his long bow was destroyed early on in the war when run over by a truck. He would often play the bagpipes as he went into action, repeatedly playing Scottish tunes to inspire his men and intimidate the enemy. People don't realize how scary bagpipes can be. You got bagpipes coming at your ass, you're probably in a lot of trouble. He was known for his extraordinary courage and leadership, often being at the forefront of attacks, seemingly fearless in the face of danger. He was involved in Operation Archery. He participated in this raid on German installations in Norway, earning the Military Cross. The Salerno land in Italy. He was commander of the No. 2 Commando, and he led a landing at Salerno. He and his men captured a German mortar position, taking 42 prisoners using only swords. He was awarded an award for this act. Yugoslavia in 1944. He served with commandos in Yugoslavia. He would eventually be captured in Yugoslavia by Germans. He was sent to a concentration camp, but managed to escape with a Royal Air Force officer. They were recaptured near Rostock and later transferred to a special prisoner of war camp for prominent prisoners. He eventually escaped again from this camp in April 1945, just before the war's end. Walked over 100 miles to Italy, where he met with American forces. After his distinct military career, he would then become an actor. Susan Kuhnhausen. Susan Kuhnhausen, or Susan Walters, is an emergency room nurse who survived a murder-for-hire plot in September 2006. Her husband, Michael Kuhnhausen, hired a hitman, Ed Haffey, to kill her at her home in Southeast Portland. Upon arriving home after finishing her shift at Providence Portland Medical Center, Susan was attacked by Haffey, who ambushed her with a claw hammer. Despite being struck in the head, Susan, who was 51 years old at the time, fought back. She drew on her strength and her self-defense training and managed to disarm Haffey, wrestle him to the ground, and strangle him to death in self-defense. During the attack, Haffey only spoke 2 words: "You're strong." The statement made Susan realize that he was there to kill her. After Haffey stopped moving, she fled to a neighbor's house and called 911. She later learned that Haffey had died. Police investigations revealed that Susan's husband had paid Ed Haffey $50,000 to kill her. Michael Kuhnhausen went into hiding but was apprehended a week later. Susan obviously filed for divorce and changed her last name to Walter. Michael Kuhnhausen was convicted for orchestrating the murder-for-hire plot and died of cancer in prison before his scheduled release. Susan Kuhnhausen became a victim advocate in Portland, sharing her story and offering support to other crime victims. The Lead Masks case. The Lead Mask case, also known as the Vintum Lead Mask case, is an unsolved mystery surrounding the deaths of 2 electronics technicians in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in August 1966. On August 20th, 1966, the bodies of Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana were discovered by a hiker. The discovery was made a few days after their deaths, as the area was remote and difficult to access. The scene where the bodies were found was unusual and has established the mystery involving the case. Each man was wearing a crude homemade lead mask that covered their eyes and forehead. They were dressed in formal suits, despite the remote location and hot weather. A notebook was found near their bodies containing cryptic notes and symbols seemingly related to spiritualism and possibly instructions of some kind of experiment. Some notes mentioned "be at the determined place," "ingest capsules," and "after signal, protect metal," further fueling speculation about their activity. An empty water bottle and a towel were also found nearby. There were no obvious signs of violence or struggle at the scene. The bodies were laying side by side. The initial police investigation was hampered by the remote location and the time elapsed between the bodies were found. Some believe that this was an unaliving pact, perhaps as part perhaps as part of some spiritual ritual. The lead masks and cryptic notes seem to support this idea. However, there was no clear note, and the circumstances are still very strange. Murder is also considered, but there were no obvious signs of struggle or gunshot. Toxicology tests were conducted, but no common poisons were detected. Of course, as with any bizarre case, aliens are suggested. Some speculate that the men were involved in some kind of extraterrestrial contact or experiment gone wrong. The case has been revisited and re-examined, particularly with advances in forensic science. And the initial investigation has been criticized as being somewhat rushed and possibly mishandled. Some people believe that more advanced toxicology analysis might be warranted to look at the substances that might not have been detectable in 1960s technology. However, it's unclear if this has ever been done, and it probably will never be done. To this day, the official cause of death remains undetermined. This is certainly a weird situation, and I think that the most likely situation is these are two people that were involved in some sort of fringe religious practice or some sort of other fringe spiritual practice and decided to go and do this. I think the unaliving theory is probably most likely. I mean, it says the note said to ingest capsule, which I think is pretty clear to me. The shark arm case. Oh boy. The shark arm case is a mystery that originated in, of course, Australia. It's a real life event that involves a tiger shark, a human arm, and a web of crime. In April 1935, a large tiger shark was caught at the Coogee Beach near Sydney, Australia, and it was taken to the Coogee Aquarium. On April 17th, the shark vomited while in captivity and regurgitated a human arm. Oops, how did that get there? The human arm was identified as a left human arm that had been severed by a clean cut. It's clearly not bitten off by the shark. A tattoo of a boxer on the forearm, along with fingerprints, helped identify the arm as belonging to James Smith, a man who was missing and had a criminal past. James Smith was known as a criminal and informer in Sydney. He had been missing for several weeks prior to the shark incident, and his criminal activities included forgery and fraud. Shark fraud, perhaps. Further examination of the contents of the shark's stomach revealed not only the arm, but also a rat and a bird, although that's pretty normal for a shark. There were no other body parts, and specifically no other body parts of James Smith found in the shark, only the arm. This suggests that the shark had only ingested the arm after it had already been severed. The police began investigating on determining how James Smith's arm ended up in the shark and what happened to the rest of his body. There were key suspects. Patrick Brady. Patrick Brady was a known associate of James Smith who also had a criminal record. He was the last person who had seen Smith before his disappearance. Brady was also said to have financial dealings with Smith and owed him money. Reginald Holmes. Reginald Holmes was a boat builder and known criminal figure and drug dealer in Sydney. He was also associated with Smith, and Holmes was suspected of being involved in various illegal activities, including smuggling. The leading theory is that Patrick Brady murdered James Smith, possibly due to a debt or criminal dispute. The motive is believed to be related to insurance fraud. It's suspected that Smith and Brady were involved in an insurance fraud scheme where they intended to fake Smith's death to collect on a life insurance policy. And the plan possibly went horribly wrong. I would say so. Body parts are ending up in sharks. The idea emerged that the shark was used as a way to dispose of Smith's body, or at least part of it, after he was murdered. The clean cut of the arm suggested it was deliberately severed, not bitten off. The case took another bizarre turn when Reginald Holmes was found dead in his car in Lavender Bay, Sydney, in June 1935. He had been shot in the head. His death was officially ruled a suicide, but many suspect foul play, perhaps to silence him and prevent him from revealing information about Smith's death. Despite extensive investigation, numerous witnesses, and strong suspicions, no one has ever been charged with murder in the shark arm case. There was insufficient evidence to definitively prove who killed James Smith or how his arm ended up in the shark. Patrick Brady was initially charged with murder, but was released due to lack of evidence. The shark arm case remains an unsolved mystery and a bizarre crime. I'm sure it was probable that Smith was unalived by somebody. Probably his body was probably thrown into the ocean, and, the arm ended up in the shark. Who knows what happened to the rest of the body? Maybe other animals ate it. Maybe it just sort of decomposed. So, the shark is an interesting aspect of it, but probably not a huge, this probably wouldn't be as interesting of a story had, the shark not ate the guy's arm. Celine Delgado Lopez. Celine Delgado Lopez is a name that is associated with an internet urban legend. There is no evidence that Celine Delgado Lopez is a real missing person. The mystery centers around a specific photograph of a young woman with dark hair and eyes, and the image is widely circulated online alongside the name Celine Delgado Lopez. The accompanying text usually claim that Celine Delgado Lopez is a missing person who disappeared in Mexico, often stating that she had been missing since the 1990s or early 2000s. The message often urges people to share the image to help find her. The image and story has been widely spread on social media platforms, messaging apps, and online forums, particularly in Spanish-speaking internet communities. It often resurfaces, going viral again and again and again. There is a lack of official missing person record of her. Despite the widespread circulation of the image and claims, no official missing person reports or records for a Celine Delgado Lopez matching the description and time frame have ever been verified by authorities in Mexico or elsewhere. Law enforcement agencies and missing person databases do not list anyone by that name matching the circulated details. The Celine Delgado Lopez phenomenon is now regarded to be an internet urban legend. It's believed to have been originated online, possibly as a fabricated story intended to be unsettling or to test the spread of misinformation online. Some theories have suggested the image may have originated from a Venezuelan television broadcast glitch in the late 1990s or early 2000s. The image may have briefly appeared on screen during a technical issue, and someone online created the missing person story around it. However, the origin is speculative and not definitively proven. This is one of those situations where it appears to be, a television glitch that caused some sort of creepy situation, and people wanting to, ramp up the creepiness of it, create a whole story around it, your typical creepypasta, internet urban legend type story. And the picture's disturbing, so it helped. Sneha Ann Phillip. Sneha Ann Phillip was a 28-year-old Indian-American physician who disappeared on September 10th, 2001, the day before the September 11th terrorist attack. She was last seen on the afternoon of September 10th, 2001, shopping at Century 21 department store in downtown Manhattan. The store is very close to the World Trade Center, or where the World Trade Center was. Her husband, Ron Lieberman, reported her missing on the morning of September 11th, 2001. He stated that Sneha had gone out the previous day to run errands and had not returned to their apartment in Battery Park City. Because she was last seen near the World Trade Center the day before the terrorist attacks and was missing when the terrorist attacks occurred, there was initial speculation and public assumption that Sneha may have been a victim of 9/11. However, her remains were not found at Ground Zero, despite extensive searches of the World Trade Center for victim. And she was never identified as a victim in the immediate aftermath. There are several possible theories. The first was that she was a 9/11 victim, which was what it was initially assumed. However, the lack of remains and official confirmation make it very unlikely that she died in the attack. There's also theories that she ran away, was involved in foul play unrelated to 9/11, or disappearance was related to foul play unrelated to 9/11, or that she had an accident elsewhere. Some also believe that perhaps she decided she wanted to disappear intentionally and start a new life, although there's no concrete evidence for any of it. Sneha's husband and her family initially fought to have her recognized as a victim of 9/11. Eventually, in 2004, a court declared that she was not a 9/11 victim. However, the decision was later overturned in 2008 by an appeals court, which declared her a victim of 9/11. The ruling was based partly on the argument that if she had been near the World Trade Center on September 11th, it was plausible that she could have been caught in the attacks while trying to help as a doctor, or caught some other way. Despite this, as I said earlier, her body was never recovered at Ground Zero. Despite the legal rulings and theories, her disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Now, personally, I think that this is just someone who disappeared for whatever reason and just happened to have the unlucky experience of disappearing at the time and place of September 11th. If this person was kidnapped or, decided to disappear on her own, regardless of what that led to, the September 11th attacks obviously was a cover enough, or was a bigger deal enough to exhaust resources for her to either, fully disappear, or for whatever happened to her to happen to her without the scrutiny of law enforcement. I hope that she's still alive and she's okay somewhere, but I also think that that's very unlikely. Armen Meiwes. Armen Meiwes, often referred to as a Rottenburg cannibal or master butcher, is a German man who gained international notoriety for committing an act of consensual cannibalism in 2001. In March 2001, Armen Meiwes met Bernd Jürgen Brandes through an online forum for cannibalism fantasy. Both men expressed a desire to be eaten or to eat someone. Brandes willingly traveled to Meiwes' remote farmhouse in Rottenburg, Germany, with an explicit purpose of being killed and eaten by Meiwes. They spent hours together, during which Brandes reportedly consented to every step of what was to happen. Meiwes filmed the entire process of dismembering and eating Brandes. The video footage became crucial evidence in the subsequent trial. Over the following months, Meiwes consumed portions of Brandes' body, stored other parts in his freezer. Meiwes sought out other potential victims online, expressing a desire for younger flesh. One individual he contacted became suspicious and alerted the police. Meiwes was arrested in December 2001. Police found the video recordings and remaining body parts at his home. The case raised legal and ethical questions about consensual cannibalism because it was not explicitly illegal in Germany. The prosecution had to argue that Meiwes was guilty of murder, not just assisted suicide or manslaughter. Meiwes was initially convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8.5 years of prison. The court at the time accepted that Brandes had consented to his death. The initial verdict was deemed too lenient by many and was overturned on appeal. The higher regional court in Frankfurt ordered a retrial on the murder charge. In May 2006, Armen Meiwes was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. The court ruled that his crime constituted murder because it was committed for sexual gratification, necrophilia, and cannibalism, and that Brandes' consent was not legally relevant in this context. Psychiatric evaluations of Meiwes suggested that he suffered from personality disorders and fantasies, but he was deemed legally sane and fully responsible for his actions. His motivations appeared to be rooted in deep-seated personal fantasies and a desire for intimacy and control, albeit in a horrific form. Armen Meiwes is currently serving a life sentence in Germany. In 2024, a German court rejected his appeal for early release, confirming he would be imprisoned for life. Now, this brings up a lot of questions of consent. A lot of ethical questions there. A lot of people argue that people do have a right to die if they so want to. I don't know. You can tell me what you think about that. I know that theory has been taking shape and has been advancing, albeit slowly, in the last few years, or especially in the last few decades. Adam Rainer. Adam Rainer was an Austrian man who is the only person in medical history to have been documented as both a little person and a giant during his lifetime. He was born in Graz, Austria in 1899. As a young man, he was notably short. At 19, he measured only 4 foot 8 inches, which at the time was below the cutoff for being a little person. So he was considered a little person. He was of slight build and considered weak. He tried to enlist in the army during World War I twice and was rejected both times. Around age 21, Rainer began an extraordinary and rapid growth spurt. Over the next decade, he grew dramatically. By the age of 32, he had reached the height of 7 foot 1.75 inches. This is the gain of over 2.5 inches in just over a decade. The rapid growth indicated the onset of gigantism caused by the excessive production of growth hormone. Doctors diagnosed him with acromegaly, a condition usually caused by a tumor in the pituitary gland. This tumor disrupts the normal production of growth hormone. His gigantism was accompanied by a range of other health problems, such as a spinal curvature. He became increasingly weak and eventually was bedridden, and he started losing his sight and hearing. At age 31, doctors operated to remove the pituitary tumor. The surgery was partially successful in slowing down his growth, but it didn't stop it entirely. Even after surgery, his spine continued to curve. Adam Rainer died in 1950 at the age of 51. At the time of his death, he measured 7 foot 8 inches tall. This means that he grew nearly 3 feet after being considered a little person at age 19. This is a pretty crazy case, and it sounds like a pretty uncomfortable situation to be in. I feel bad for this guy, and it feels like his life was pretty awful based on all of these health problems related to this wild growth. And that's the end of part 1 of tier 5 of The Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. Make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer, so you can keep following these Iceberg videos and see my other videos. Make sure that you like this video and share it. Make sure you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBrews. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter also. My username is AKBrews there as well. There is a super thanks button in the YouTube toolbar if you would like to make a donation to the channel to support the channel. You can click that and make a donation. I would appreciate it. And if there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, hey spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with part 2 of tier 5 of The Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. You'll recall this is the 6-month anniversary of this channel, so we are finishing up this Iceberg series to celebrate, and you know the deal at this point, so let's get spooky. Isaac Sprague. Isaac Sprague is also known as the Living Skeleton. He was born in 1941 in Hingham, Massachusetts. He developed a progressive wasting disease in his early teens that caused him to lose weight drastically and continuously to the point where he became emaciated. His exact condition was never definitively diagnosed during his lifetime. However, modern sources speculate about progressive muscular atrophy or some sort of progressive lipodystrophy, but these remain retrospective guesses. No one's actually going back to evaluate. He was described as around 5'6" or 5'7", but his lightest recorded weight was only 43 pounds. Photos of him clearly show his bones and ribcage prominently visible. Due to his strange appearance, Isaac Sprague became a sideshow performer. He toured with circuses and museums, exhibiting himself as the original living skeleton. He found success in his career, and his condition was a public curiosity. Despite his condition, Isaac Sprague married and had 3 healthy sons. He attempted to live a normal life and worked at various jobs, including as a shoemaker and a grocer, before fully committed to the sideshow circuit due to financial necessity. It's kind of sad. Kind of sad that that's what he had to do to make money. Even with his fame as a sideshow attraction, Isaac Sprague struggled financially. He was known to be a kind and intelligent man, but his health and the nature of his profession meant he faced hardship. Sprague died in poverty on January 5th in 1887 in Chicago, Illinois, of asphyxia. He was 45 years old. Sprague is remembered as the most famous living skeleton performer in history. His case remains a medical enigma and an example of the human body's capacity to endure extreme conditions. There would be many other living skeleton acts to follow in the sideshow world. It's important to understand that Isaac was a real person who suffered from a debilitating and ultimately likely fatal disease. It's kind of gross that these people were forced to have to live in the circus or other sideshow circuits to make money. They had to, degrade themselves and exploit themselves in humiliating area in order to make ends meet. And that's sad. While we don't have circus sideshows today, while those have sort of fallen out of favor, we do kind of have similar things with social media. So I don't know. Have we really progressed that much of a society from this time? I don't know that we have. Jonathan. Jonathan the tortoise is a Seychelles giant tortoise believed to be approximately 192 years old as of 2025. Making him the oldest known living land animal in the world. Look, I don't want to live to be 100. 100 is good. If I make it to 100, I am fine with checking out at 100. I don't need an extra 92 years added on, okay? He hatched around 1832. His age is estimated as he was not believed to be fully mature when he arrived in St. Helena in 1882. He currently resides on St. Helena Island, a British overseas territory in the South Atlantic Ocean. He lives on the grounds of a plantation house, the official residence of the governor of St. Helena. So he's basically like, he's basically in the government over there. He's an ambassador. We got a tortoise ambassador. Jonathan has lived through the terms of 31 governors of St. Helena. And his estimated age recently exceeds that of Tue Malila, who is previously recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest tortoise ever recorded. Jonathan is a national treasure of St. Helena and a global celebrity, as he should be. And he is even on the St. Helena 5-pence coin. Pretty neat. I like Jonathan, and I'm glad he's going strong. Seen a lot in his time, that's for sure. Lonesome George. Lonesome George was a Pink Island tortoise and the last known individual of that subspecies. He became a global icon for conservation and the plight of endangered species. He was discovered on Pink Island in the Galapagos Islands in 1971. Pink Island tortoises were thought to be extinct at that point due to overhunting by sailors in the 19th century and the habitat destruction from people introducing goats to the area. His discovery came as a surprise and raised hopes for the subspecies' survival. Scientists at the Charles Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz Island in the Galapagos Islands took George into captivity to protect him and attempt to breed him. He was housed with female tortoises from other closely related subspecies, particularly from Espanola Island. Despite decades of effort and various female companions, Lonesome George never successfully reproduced. When he mated with the females and eggs were laid, none of them were fertile. The inability to produce offspring cemented his status as the last of his kind and earned him the name of Lonesome George. Lonesome George became a powerful symbol of extinction. He represented the tragic consequences of the human impact on biodiversity and the irreversible loss of a subspecies. And this is a sad story. I can't imagine the deep sadness. Well, to be fair, I hear of this idea of a species being the last of its kind, and I find that to be deeply sad. Lonesome George died on June 24th, 2012. At the estimated age of over 100 years old. His death marked the extinction of the Pink Island tortoise subspecies. The Hands Resist Him. The Hands Resist Him is the title of a painting created by Oakland, California-based artist Bill Stoneham in 1972. It's infamous due to an internet urban legend claiming the painting is haunted or cursed. The painting depicts a young boy and a doll standing in front of a glass door. Behind them, numerous hands are pressed against the glass. The boy is based on a photograph of Stoneham himself at age 5. The door is meant to represent the veil between the waking world and the dream world / afterlife. It was displayed in a fine art gallery in Beverly Hills in the early 1970s. According to Stoneham, art critic Henry Seldis of the Los Angeles Times reviewed it favorably. The painting resurfaced in February 2000 when it was put up for sale on eBay by an unnamed couple in California. This is where the haunted legend takes off. The eBay sellers claimed that the painting was cursed and brought bad luck to anyone who owned it. They described a series of unsettling experiences associated with the painting. They claimed that figures in the painting moved on their own, sometimes changing positions or even leaving the canvas. They said the boy and doll would sometimes leave the painting and enter the room where it was displayed. They reported that their young daughter claimed the figures in the painting were fighting and would cry or scream at night. They described a sense of unease and a feeling of warmth emanating from the painting as if there was an unseen presence. The eBay listing, with its dramatic claims and the unsettling image of the painting itself, went viral. People were fascinated and disturbed by the story and the painting's eerie atmosphere. Bill Stoneham, the artist, acknowledged that the painting does have a somewhat unsettling or eerie quality, which was intentional. He said it was to depict a dreamlike or liminal space. However, Stoneham has firmly denied that the painting was actually haunted or cursed. He attributed the stories to imagination and the power of suggestion. Stoneham did note some unfortunate events that occurred to people connected to the painting after it was created. The gallery owner who first displayed it and the art critic who reviewed it both died within a year of encountering the painting. Stoneham himself experienced a series of misfortune in the years after the painting. He suggested these events were coincidences, but they certainly add the painting's mystique. Some of the explanations for the creepiness or the haunting of this painting could be the pareidolia, or pattern recognition. The human brain is wired to see faces and patterns even in ambiguous stimuli. The shadowy hands and doll-like figure in the painting are visually ambiguous and can trigger pareidolia, leaving viewers to see movement or changes that aren't really there. And there's always the power of suggestion and confirmation bias, right? A lot of these things always happen. Once the haunted stories begin going around, people viewing the painting or in person are already primed to expect something haunted, something spooky to happen. And this expectation leads to confirmation bias, where they interpret ambiguous sensations or feelings as evidence of paranormal activity. Or something happens after being around the painting and they can blame the painting for it. Even if, had they not known that this painting had this reputation, they wouldn't do so. The internet and the eBay listing did a great job of amplifying and spreading this story. And the eBay listing turned the Hands Resistum into a viral creepypasta. The painting was purchased on eBay by Kim Smith, who runs a paranormal investigation website in Chicago. It's kept in storage and is sometimes displayed at paranormal conventions or events. That sounds like a field trip that I need to track down and go do and shoot a video about. We'll see how spooky this painting can be. Honestly, I believe that the eBay listing was likely to hype up the eBay listing. You know, that is also a pretty good explanation for what's happening with this painting. You're selling something on eBay and you want to get it sold. So what you do is you sort of exaggerate. I'm not even saying they're making these stories up, but you exaggerate the stories of the painting to get hype so it sells to somebody, so somebody buys it. Makes sense, right? The 1973 Stockholm Bank robbery. You're going to recognize this. The 1973 Stockholm Bank robbery began on August 23rd, 1973 at the Kreditbanken Bank on Norrmalmstorg Square in Stockholm, Sweden. It's famous for giving rise to the term Stockholm Syndrome. Here's what happened. On August 23rd, Jan-Erik Olsson, a convicted felon, attempted to rob the Kreditbanken Bank in Stockholm. He was armed with a submachine gun. The robbery turned into a hostage situation when police arrived. Olsen took 4 bank employees hostage: Birgitta Lundblad, Birgitta Lundberg, Elizabeth Oldgren, and Sven Safstrom. Olsen demanded that his friend and notorious criminal Clark Olofsson, be brought to the bank. Olofsson was in prison at the time and was allowed to join Olsen at the bank by police. Kind of a nice job by Olsen here. Also, man, these names are so similar. There was a standoff between the robbers and the police that lasted for 6 days. The hostages were held in the bank vault with the robber. During the standoff, something unexpected happened. The hostages began to develop a sympathetic bond with their captors, particularly with Clark Olofsson. They defended the robber. The hostages expressed sympathy for the robbers and fear of the police. They actively resisted police attempts to rescue them, even physically shielding the robbers from police. One hostage, Kristen Enmark, even stated she trusted the robbers and was more afraid of the police. She reportedly developed a close emotional bond with Clark Olofsson. After their release, some hostages were initially reluctant to testify against their captor. On August 28, 1973, police used tear gas to end the standoff. The robbers surrendered, and the hostages were freed unharmed. Psychiatrist Niels Bergerot, who assisted police during the crisis, coined the term Stockholm Syndrome to describe the paradoxical psychological phenomenon where hostages develop positive feelings towards their captor. The term was popularized by media coverage of the event. Stockholm Syndrome is understood as a survival strategy. In terrifying and confusing situations where hostages are dependent on their captives for survival, they may develop positive feelings towards them as a coping mechanism. I know some people who develop this type of positive feelings towards their law professors in law school. It's a complex psychological response to trauma and captivity. It's important to note that while the term Stockholm Syndrome is widely used, its validity as a formal psychiatric diagnosis is debated. Some experts argue it's more of a coping mechanism or survival strategy than a true syndrome, and that term can be oversimplified or misused. The Wanghongchang Armory explosion. The Wanghongchang Armory explosion was a catastrophic and mysterious explosion that occurred on May 30th, 1626 in Beijing, China, during the late Ming Dynasty. It is one of the most significant unexplained disasters in Chinese history and is often referred to as the Great Tianqi Explosion because it happened during the reign of the Tianqi Emperor. Here's what is known. On May 30th, 1626, the 6th year of the Tianqi Empire's reign, the Wanghongchang Armory, which was located in Beijing, was a major gunpowder and weapons manufacturing storage facility for the Ming Dynasty. A massive, unexplained explosion occurred at the armory. It was described as a sudden earth-shattering blast that was heard and felt across a wide area of Beijing and even in the surrounding region. The explosion was very powerful and caused widespread damage. The blast zone, the primary blast zone, was estimated to cover an area of about 2.25 square kilometers around the Wanghongchang Armory. Damage was reported even further away. The estimates of the casualties vary widely, ranging from thousands to over 20,000 people killed or injured. Many were instantly vaporized or torn apart by the blast. The official Ming Dynasty records are vague, but contemporary accounts describe horrific scenes of death and destruction. Thousands of buildings, homes, structures within the blast radius were completely flattened or severely damaged. Debris rained down over a large area. It was reported that even the emperor's palace was shaken. Eyewitness accounts and the historical records describe several bizarre and unexplained phenomena associated with the explosion. Many victims were found with their clothes completely stripped off, even though buildings were destroyed. This suggests a powerful pressure wave of some unusual force. Large trees were uprooted and scattered like twigs. Stones and debris were hurled great distance, causing further damage and casualties. Accounts mention a dark cloud mushrooming in the sky after the initial flash, followed by fire. Some accounts suggest strange weather phenomena before or after the explosion, although this is less consistently reported. There are several theories about what the exact cause of the Wanghongchang explosion was. However, the true cause is a mystery and has been debated for centuries. The official Ming Dynasty explanation was that it was an accidental explosion of gunpowder stored in the armory. However, historians and scientists believe that this explanation is incorrect because of the scale and unusual phenomena associated with the blast. A simple gunpowder explosion is unlikely to explain the clothing stripping or other effect. An earthquake was initially suggested, but there's no geological evidence of a major earthquake in Beijing at that time. Some scientists have proposed that a small meteorite impact or an airburst from a bolide could explain the scale and effect, but this theory has supported some of the unusual phenomena. However, there's no crater or definitive physical evidence of a meteorite impact. A volcanic eruption has been suggested, but Beijing is not in a volcanically active area. A methane explosion. The buildup and sudden ignition of methane gas from the underground sources has been suggested, but it's unclear if such an explosion could produce an explosion of this magnitude. Some have speculated that the army may have been experimenting with new or more volatile explosives beyond just gunpowder and an accident, which I think is probably the most likely response. And of course, because it's unexplained, there's always alien. Now, I think the most likely situation here is they were experimenting with other types of explosion or other types of explosive things, other types of explosive compounds, and it led to this explosion, but nobody knows. The monster stuttering experiment. The monster stuttering experiment, or the monster study, officially known as the Tudor study, is a name often given to a controversial stuttering experiment conducted in 1939 at the University of Iowa. It was led by Wendell Johnson and carried out by his graduate student, Mary Tudor. The experiment is considered highly unethical by modern research standards and is cited as a dark example of psychological research gone wrong. Wendell Johnson, a prominent speech pathologist at the University of Iowa, Mary Tudor was Johnson's graduate student who conducted the experiment as part of her master's thesis. Johnson and Tudor wanted to see if they could induce stuttering in normally fluent children by falsely labeling their normal speech as stuttering and negatively reinforcing them. The study involved 22 orphaned children at the Iowa Soldiers Orphan Home in Davenport, Iowa. The children were divided into 2 groups. Why orphans? Well, because they could. That's the end. The experimental group consisted of children who already stuttered. Group 1A were stuttering children who were told they were not stuttering and that their speech was fine. They were encouraged to ignore any disfluencies and speak normally. The goal here was to see if positive reinforcement could improve their speech, contrasting with the negative reinforcement part of the overall study. The second group was a control group of stuttering children who received no intervention. And there was a control group of normally non-stuttering children. And the monster study. These were non-stuttering children who were falsely told that they were stutterers. They were given negative feedback on their speech, told they should not speak unless they could speak correctly, and warned they were showing signs of stuttering. This is the group at the heart of the monster study controversy. The group of non-stuttering children were subjected to verbal harassment and psychological manipulation by tutor and other resources. They were labeled as stutterers despite not being so. They were constantly criticized for their speech, told their speech was abnormal and that they should be ashamed. They were instructed to never speak unless they could speak perfectly. Contrary to the researchers' hypothesis, none of the normally non-stuttering children in the second group developed chronic stuttering as a result of the experiment. However, the children suffered significant negative psychological effects. They became more hesitant and reluctant to speak, obviously. They were self-conscious and anxious about it. They were withdrawn and quiet. Some showed speech abnormalities, although not full stuttering, such as hesitations and using simpler vocabulary. These negative effects were both observed during the experiment and in the follow-up. The results for the stuttering children who were told that their speech was fine were less clear and often less emphasized in discussions of the monster study. Some showed slight improvements, but the overall impact was not dramatic or consistently positive. This was obviously highly unethical. The Tudor study is now widely condemned as a serious violation of research ethics. It caused psychological harm to vulnerable children for no therapeutic benefit and without informed consent. The orphans were children and not capable of giving informed consent. There is no indication that the proper ethical review or guardian consent was obtained. The experiment inflicted emotional distress and negative self-perception of the children and had some lasting effect for years. That whole story is terrible, and what those children had to go through, absolutely terrible that prior to or years ago, people viewed orphans as just fine to experiment on. You know, what an awful thing for those children to have to go through. Patricia Meehan. Patricia Bernadette Meehan was born on November 1st, 1951, and disappeared on April 20th, 1989 after being involved in a car accident on Montana Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Here's what's known about her disappearance. On the evening of April 20th, 1989, Patricia was driving on the wrong side of Highway 200 and nearly caused a head-on collision with another car driven by Peggy Bueller. While Peggy Bueller avoided a collision, Patricia's car then crashed into a car behind Ms. Bueller, driven by an off-duty police dispatcher, Carol Height. Ms. Heights was unharmed. After the accident, Ms. Heights saw Patricia, who had emerged from her car. According to Heights, Patricia stared at her without speaking, as though she were looking right through her. Peggy Bueller also witnessed Patricia climb over a fence and stand silently, watching the scene like a spectator, not like it happened to her, before walking away into a field and disappearing into the night. Police were called, and upon identifying the car's owner as Patricia Meehan, the search was launched. However, they could not find her. Investigators initially considered that Patricia might have fled the scene due to fear and been suffering from amnesia as a result of a head injury from the accident. Those who knew her, including her mother Dolly Meehan, noted that Patricia had seemed depressed and withdrawn in the time leading up to her disappearance. Her landlord also mentioned that she seemed hyper the day before her accident. There have been over 5,000 alleged sightings of Patricia Meehan reported in the years following her disappearance, and some have been confirmed by police. It was thought that she may have been hitchhiking with trucks. However, none of these sightings led to her being found. Patricia has never contacted her family or friends since her disappearance, so this is an unsolved mystery. This is a pretty scary, bizarre case. Kind of sounds to me like the theory that maybe she had some sort of mental health issues and then had some sort of a head injury. That head injury probably confounded those mental health issues and maybe caused her to forget who she was or attempt to flee. You know, if the suggestion that she was hyper by her landlord suggests she might have been in a manic state. But usually those things are temporary. You know, usually people don't disappear forever in those situations. So it also sort of sounds to me like something bad happened to her while she was in that space. And, you know, perhaps she's no longer with us. What very sad. Stephen Kubacki. Stephen Kubacki is an unusual missing person case that occurred in 1978. He was a 23-year-old student at Hope College in Holland, Michigan, where he mysteriously disappeared and then reappeared with amnesia about the missing time. On February 20th, 1978, Stephen Kubacki went cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan and Saugatuck, Michigan. He was last seen by a friend around 3 p.m. When he didn't return by nightfall, a search was launched. An extensive search involving police, helicopters, snowmobiles, and volunteers was conducted for Stephen. They searched the wooded area and the frozen surface of Lake Michigan. His ski tracks were found leading toward the lake, but then abruptly stopped at the edge of the ice. It was initially feared he had fallen through the ice and drowned in Lake Michigan. Despite the search, no trace of Stephen was found. No body, no skis, no hat, no clothing, nothing. The lake was dragged, but nothing was ever recovered. Authorities and his family were baffled. It was assumed he had likely drowned and his body was lost in Lake Michigan. 15 months later, on May 5, 1979, Stephen Kubacki suddenly reappeared in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 700 miles away from where he disappeared. He was found wandering in a field, disoriented and confused. Stephen had no memory of the 15 months he had gone missing. He couldn't recall how he got to Massachusetts, where he had been, or where he was going. He had no memory of the entire missing period. Despite being missing for over 15 months, Stephen was in relatively good physical condition. He was clean-shaven, he had neatly trimmed hair, and was wearing clothes that were not the same as the ones he was wearing when he disappeared. He may have lost some weight, but he was not emaciated. There are several theories about what happened to Stephen. The official explanation is amnesia and wandering. That Stephen suffered a dissociative fugue, a rare form of amnesia where a person wanders away from their life and loses memory of their past. In this theory, he wandered away from the lake, somehow made his way to Massachusetts, and then his memory spontaneously returned. However, 15 months is a significantly long period for this type of fugue or this type of condition. Some theories suggest he was kidnapped or abducted, possibly by unknown individuals or even aliens. However, there's no evidence to support kidnapping, and the lack of any ransom demand or any typical signs of abduction make this less likely. It's also possible that Stephen intentionally disappeared to start a new life, but his friends and family strongly dispute this. They say it would be completely out of character for him, and his genuine distress and amnesia upon a reappearance seem to contradict this theory. Others have speculated that an undiagnosed medical condition could have caused his amnesia and wandering, although no specific condition has been identified. And of course, there are others believe that this was a hoax and that Stephen just played a hoax for 15 months, which would be very strange. Stephen Kubacki eventually returned to Michigan and tried to rebuild his life. He has remained largely out of the public eye and has not fully recovered his memory of the missing 15 months. The case remains a very strange mystery. Jennifer Kesey. Jennifer Kesey was a 24-year-old woman who disappeared in Orlando, Florida in January 2006. Her case remains unsolved and is a high-profile missing persons mystery. Here's what we know. Jennifer disappeared on January 24, 2006 from her condominium in Orlando, Florida. She lived at Mosaic Condominiums on Millennial Boulevard. On the evening of January 23rd, Jennifer spoke with her parents and boyfriend by phone, making plans for the next day. Everything seemed normal. On the morning of January 24th, Jennifer was expected to arrive at Central Florida Investments timeshare company around 8 a.m. That's where she worked. She never arrived. Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob Allen, called her parents, Joyce and Drew Kesey, when Jennifer didn't show up to work and wasn't answering her phone, which was unusual for her. On January 26, 2006, Jennifer's car, which was a black Chevrolet Malibu, was found parked at Huntington on the Green condominiums in Orlando, about a mile from her own condo complex. The car was locked, and there were no obvious signs of Jennifer inside. Surveillance footage from the Huntington on the Green condos showed an unidentified person parking Jennifer's car around noon on January 24th, which was the day she disappeared, and walking away. This individual became a person of interest in the case. The video was taken from a distance and was grainy and unclear. The person's face was obscured by the condo gate and the distance, making identification difficult, if not impossible. The investigators noted the person's unusual gait, describing them as walking like a duck, which became a distinctive, although ultimately unhelpful detail. Based on the video, police released a composite sketch of the person of interest, but it didn't lead to any identification. When police checked inside of Jennifer's condo, they found no sign of forced entry or struggle. The condo appeared normal. It appeared as if Jennifer had gotten ready for work as usual. Her clothes were laid out, she had taken a shower. The items that were missing were her keys, her purse, her cell phone, and her briefcase. Over the years, there's been various theories and leads that have been investigated, but the case has not been solved. Some have suggested that Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob Allen, was responsible, and he was thoroughly investigated and ruled out as a suspect. Others have noted that since Jennifer's condo complex was undergoing construction, that perhaps construction workers were involved in the disappearance. The most common theory is that Jennifer was abducted, possibly from the parking lot of her condo complex as she was leaving for work. There have been recent developments in this case that have now suggested that there may have been some type of struggle. Recently released police photos suggest that there may have been a struggle associated with Jennifer's car. One of the records states it looked like someone had been thrown on top of the hood, arms spread out, and then dragged back, almost like off of the hood. This is a new detail that's emerged, suggesting perhaps more occurred at the car than initially known or publicly stated. Her family said that the car was left bearing signs of a struggle, and that despite investigators' previous claims otherwise, Orlando Police Department files showed DNA evidence was collected from the car. Despite the extensive investigation, media attention, and the family's efforts, Jennifer Kesey's disappearance remains unsolved. It's one of Orlando's most baffling missing persons cases and a source of ongoing mystery and heartbreak for the family and the people who love her. Yeah, I think it's most likely she was abducted and something bad happened. I hope I'm wrong about that, but it seems most likely she was abducted. Jodi Huisentruit was a 27-year-old news anchor for KIMT TV in Mason City, Iowa, who disappeared early on in the morning on June 27, 1995. Her disappearance is an unsolved mystery and one of Iowa's most famous unsolved. Jodi disappeared sometime between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. on June 27, 1995 from the parking lot of her apartment complex, the Colony Court Apartments in Mason City, Iowa. Jodi had been scheduled to anchor the KIMTV morning news that she overslept and called the station at 3:40 to say she was running late but would be in soon. She then got ready for work and was planning to leave for the station. When Jodi didn't show up for work, colleagues became concerned. Police were called, and investigators found the following in the parking lot of her apartment complex. They found her red Mazda Miata parked in her usual spot. Near her car, police found evidence suggesting a struggle had taken place. There were scattered items. Jodi's keys, shoes, hairdryer, and a can of hairspray were found scattered around her car. One of her car keys was found back. An unidentified male palm print was found on the trunk of the car. Despite the signs of a struggle, Jodi herself was nowhere to be found. Over the years, numerous theories and suspects have been considered in Jodi's disappearance, but no one has been charged in the case. A person of interest, John Vancees, who was a neighbor and friend of Jodi's, became a person of interest early in the investigation. He lived in the same apartment complex and had reportedly helped Jodi move in. Police interviewed him multiple times, and he failed a polygraph test related to Jodi's disappearance. However, he was never charged, and he maintained his innocence. Vancees died in 2018. There is speculation about a possible love triangle involving Jodi, her boyfriend, and possibly other individuals may have led to her disappearance. Another possibility is a random abduction. A significant challenge in the case has been the lack of a clear motive for Jodi's disappearance. She was well-liked and had no known enemies, and there was no apparent reason for someone to want to harm her. The case remains officially unsolved and open, and the Mason City Police Department and the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation have worked on this case for years. There's been a dedicated and long-running community effort called Find Jodi to keep Jodi's case in the public eye and generate leads. This includes the website findjodi.com and ongoing advocacy to find answers for her disappearance. Each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, June 27th, there is renewed media attention and calls for information in the case. Despite the passage of time, Jodi's family, friends, and the community in Mason City have never given up hope of finding out what happened to her. All these disappearance cases are always so sad. You know, it's terrible enough to lose a loved one, and it's even worse when you have no closure about what happened. Count Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès is a French aristocrat who is the prime suspect in the Nantes family massacre of April 2011. He's wanted for the murders of his wife and 4 children, but has been missing since the killings and remains at large. His case is a high-profile mystery in France. He comes from a formerly noble French family, claiming the title of Count, although the legitimacy of this title is questioned. So this guy just calls himself Count. Like, you can just walk around calling yourself Count and make people call yourself. On the surface, Javier appeared to be a devoted family man. He was married to Agnes and had 4 children: Arthur, Thomas, Anne, and Benoit. He also had a son from a previous marriage named Louis. He was involved in various business ventures, some of which were unsuccessful and left him in debt. Those who knew him described him as a charming and charismatic, but also secretive and prone to exaggeration and fabrication about his background and wealth. In April 2011, Xavier, Agnes, and their 4 children disappeared from their home in Nantes, France. Initially, he was considered missing along with his family. However, as the investigation progressed, suspicion quickly focused on him. On April 21st, police discovered the bodies of Agnes and the 4 children buried under the patio of the family's home in Nantes. They were unalived, execution style, with a rifle and wrapped in sheets and quicklime. Evidence quickly pointed to Xavier as the perpetrator. He was seen purchasing cement and lime shortly before the family disappeared, materials that were used to bury the body. Remember, he was also deeply in debt and facing financial issues. He abruptly stopped communicating with friends and family and disappeared from Nantes. There was no evidence that Agnes or the children had left willingly. A will was found, apparently written by Xavier, which seemed to indicate a planned departure and financial arrangements, further raising suspicion. An international arrest warrant was issued for Xavier. French police launched a massive manhunt across France and internationally, but he was never found. Over the years, there have been numerous reported sightings and false leads, but none have led to his capture. Many theories have emerged about what happened to him. Some believe that he unalived him, possibly in the forests in the region of southern France where his car was found. However, there's never been a body recovered. Others believe he fled France and is living under an assumed identity in another country. Speculation has ranged from South America to Asia to other parts of Europe. It seems like basically almost everywhere, right? Some theories suggest he may have sought refuge in a monastery or religious community. In October 2019, there was a major development when a man was arrested at Glasgow Airport in Scotland. French police initially believed they had captured him. However, DNA testing quickly revealed the arrested man was not him, but actually a French retiree who was the victim of a mistaken identity. Surprise! This false alarm was a disappointment for investigators and the victim's family. As of today, he remains at large and is one of France's most wanted fugitives. The investigation is still officially open, but the chances of finding him after so many years are considered very slim. It seems to be one of the rare situations where this guy got away with it. He managed to disappear completely and probably lived out the rest of his life, or is living out the rest of it. The MV Joyita. The MG Joyita, which is often called the ghost ship of the South Pacific, was a merchant vessel that became famous after it was found adrift and deserted in the Pacific Ocean in 1955. The mystery surrounding its disappearance and the fate of its 25 passengers and crew remains unsolved and is the subject of numerous theories and speculations. Joyita means jewel or little jewel in Spanish. It was a luxury yacht converted into a merchant vessel. It was considered well built and seaworthy, though it had reported some minor issues in the past. It was originally owned by film director Roland West, but he later sold it. At the time of the disappearance, it was chartered for a trip to transport cargo and passengers from Samoa to the Tokelau Island. The Joyita departed Apia, Samoa on October 3, 1955, bound for the Tokelau Islands, approximately 270 miles away, and it was carrying a cargo of timber, medical supplies, food, and empty oil drums, along with 16 crew members and 9 passengers, including a doctor and a government official. The voyage was already delayed by a day due to a problem with the clutch on the port engine. Despite this, the Joyita set sail with only one engine fully functional. Joyita was expected to arrive in the Tokelau Islands on October 5th, but it never arrived. A search and rescue operation was launched. It was found adrift over a month later, on November 10, 1955. The Joyita was found by a merchant ship, the Tuvalu, around 600 miles west of its intended route near the Vanua Lava Island. The Joyita was found partially submerged, listing heavily to port, and completely deserted. There was no sign of any of the 25 people who had been on board. When boarded, the Joyita was found in a highly unusual state. Again, no passengers or crew were found on board. The hull was damaged, and the Joyita was taking on water, but it remained afloat due to the cargo of buoyant copra and sealed oil drum. The damage was later determined to be from corrosion and not a major collision. All 3 of the Joyita's life rafts were missing, including 4 tons of copra, medical supplies, and some of the oil drum. The radio was tuned to a distress frequency, but no distress call was sent. The radio was functional, but no distress call was ever sent from the Joyita. The galley was in disarray with food and dirty dishes scattered about. A doctor's medical bag was found containing a blood-stained scalpel, bandages, and several empty bottles, but no other medical support. The ship's clock was stopped at 10:25 p.m., and the electrical switches. The port engine clutch problem was confirmed, and the starboard engine was found to have been running at full speed when the ship was abandoned, but it was also damaged with corroded cooling pipes. A formal investigation was conducted, but it failed to determine conclusively what happened to the Joyita and its occupant. The official report cited unseaworthy condition as a contributing factor, but left the central mystery unsolved. Some believe that a piracy or mutiny was involved, but there wasn't much sign of violence, and there wasn't much valuable cargo that this ship was taking. Some people believe that this was an issue with insurance fraud, that the ship was deliberately abandoned for insurance fraud purposes. But the problem is the ship was not heavily insured. It's possible that it encountered bad weather, but that doesn't explain the abandonment and the specific conditions found on board. Some of the more likely theories, for example, an engine failure and that they abandoned the ship in panic, could have led to the Joyita problem. People were panicked in fear that the ship was about to sink, got into the life rafts and abandoned the ship, and then maybe they just didn't make it out of the life raft. Another theory is a medical emergency. This centers around the doctor on board, possibly a botched appendectomy performed on a passenger. The bloodstained medical supplies might support that, but it's unclear why everyone would abandon ship in this scenario and why no distress call. Some believe that there may have been a secret military experiment or a rogue submarine that led to the crew and passengers being taken off the ship. And of course, with any strange disappearance, there's always Bryce Laspisa. Bryce Laspisa was a 19-year-old college student who mysteriously disappeared on August 30th, 2013 in Castaic, California. At the time of his disappearance, Bryce was driving from Sierra College to his family's home in Orange County. On August 30th, 2013, he was last seen leaving his girlfriend's apartment after breaking up with her. Bryce's car was found overturned in a ravine near the Catatumbo Lake. His belongings were inside the vehicle, but Bryce was missing. No trace of Bryce has ever been found despite extensive searching. This case remains unsolved and is still considered a missing persons case. No one knows what happened to Bryce. It seems to me that he was likely injured in this car accident and something happened to him. Who knows? The I-70 Killer. The I-70 Killer is a nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who is believed to be responsible for a series of murders of young women working at adult bookstores and motels along Interstate 70 in the Midwestern United States during the early 1990s. The murders occurred primarily between 1992 and 1994. The murders took place along or near Interstate 70 in Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri. The victims were often found in rural areas or small towns near the highway. The victims were typically young women, often described as petite, who worked as clerks or employees at adult bookstores, motels, and sometimes gas stations near I-70. The MO of the I-70 Killer typically involved robbery, and then the victims were unalived. The victims were usually unalived by a .38 caliber handgun. The murders often occurred during the daytime, which was unusual for serial killers who typically operate at night. In most cases, there was no evidence of SA, and this is what initially led some investigators to believe that robbery was a primary motive. However, the meticulous nature of the unalivings and the targeting of vulnerable women suggest that that's not the motive. The exact number of victims officially attributed to the I-70 Killer is debated. Patricia Smith. Patricia's death predates the main I-70 killings, but she is considered possibly one of the victims in some discussion. The case spans multiple states, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, making the coordination and the investigation complex. In some cases, the evidence is limited and has degraded over time. For many years, there was no DNA evidence directly linking the cases, although DNA technology has later been applied. Law enforcement developed various profiles of the potential killer, suggesting he might be a long-haul truck driver, a traveling salesman, or someone who frequently traveled along I-70. Diao AiQing was a 19-year-old Chinese student who was brutally murdered in Nanjing, China in January 1996. Her case is known as the Nanjing Incident and remains one of China's most infamous unsolved mysteries. The gruesome nature of the crime and the lack of resolution have made it a subject of intense public interest and speculation for decades. Here's what happened. Diao AiQing, who was 19 at the time, was a first-year student at Nanjing University, majoring in computer applications at the Department of Information Management. She was from a rural area of the Jiangsu province, and she was described as shy and introverted. She disappeared on January 10, 1996. On the evening of January 9th, Diao reportedly angered her roommates after using their mahjong tiles and being sarcastic when they expressed their displeasure. This seems to be a relatively minor incident, but is noted in most accounts. After this dispute, she left her dormitory room at the university. She told her roommates she was upset and was going out for some air. This was around 6:40 p.m. She never returned. 10 days later, on January 19, 1996, a street sweeper in Nanjing made a horrific discovery. Body parts were found scattered in different locations near Nanjing University. Her body had been brutally dismembered and cut into approximately 2,000 pieces. The cuts were described as very clean and precise, suggesting someone with anatomical knowledge and perhaps specialized tools. Some reports speculate a professional butcher or someone with surgical or military. Some of the body parts were found to be cooked, boiled, or steamed, and packaged into plastic bags, along with clothing and bed sheets, and then disposed of in various garbage cans around the city. It's believed that this was done to reduce suspicion and facilitate transportation and disposal. Initially, the head and torso were not found. However, these were found later. The Nanjing police launched a massive investigation involving thousands of officers. It was one of the largest and most expensive investigations in Chinese history. In 1996, there was limited forensic technology, and DNA analysis was not as developed, and this had hindered the investigation. The extensive dismemberment and scattering of body parts made evidence collection and analysis very difficult. And despite the scale of the crime and the investigation, police struggled to find solid leads or witnesses. Over time, various potential suspects were investigated and ruled out. And despite years of investigation and renewed effort, the case is unsolved. The Yogurt Shop Murder. The Yogurt Shop Murders refers to an unsolved quadruple homicide that occurred at an I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop in Austin, Texas. Do those still exist? 4 teenage girls were tragically killed in what remains one of Texas's most horrific cold cases. On December 6, 1991, firefighters responded to a fire at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop in Austin. After extinguishing the blaze, they discovered the bodies of 4 teenage girls inside. The victims included Eliza Thomas, who was 17 years old and an employee, Jennifer Harbison, who was 17 years old and an employee, Sarah Harbison, who was Jennifer's sister and a customer. She was 15. And Amy Ayers, who was 13 and was Sarah's friend and a customer. The girls were found in the back storage room of the yogurt shop. They had been shot execution style in the head with a .22 caliber lead bullet. 3 of the girls were gagged and bound and had been severely charred by the fire, which is believed to have been intentionally set to cover up the crime. Amy Ayers was found separately, not charred, but burned, and had a cloth around her, and she had also been. The crime scene was severely compromised due to the fire, and the sprinkler system was activated by the fire, further damaged the scene. Police initially focused on 4 white teenage boys, Maurice Pierce, Michael Scott, not that Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, and Forrest Welburn. In 1999, after years of investigation, the police rearrested these men, and Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen confessed to the murders after lengthy interrogation. Scott was placed on death row in 2001, and Springsteen was sentenced to life in prison in 2002. However, in 2006, Robert Springsteen's conviction was overturned by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, citing that the men should have had the opportunity to cross-examine each other. There were also concerns about coerced confessions, including allegations that a detective held a gun to Michael Scott's head during the interrogation. In 2008, new DNA testing and DNA evidence revealed that the DNA found on one of the girls did not match any of the 4 men. This cast serious doubt on their confessions, and Scott and Springsteen were released on bond in 2009 with charges against them eventually being dismissed. Now, this is a pretty horrific case in a lot of ways, right? This is an awful thing that happened. And then it's pretty clear that the police sought these suspects, believed that these 4 people were suspects in this case, and attempt to tailor their investigation to go after these 4 and induce a false confession out of 2 of them and convict them. And the person who was likely involved appears to have gone free, or the people who were involved appear to have gone free because the police didn't do their job, decided beforehand who was involved, and decided to go after these 4. That's horrible. It's a tragedy for everyone involved. It's a tragedy for the victims' families, and the 4 men who were arrested and the families of the 4 people who were arrested. Jennifer Strange. This is a pretty terrible. Jennifer Strange was a 28-year-old woman from Sacramento, California, who died in January 2007 after participating in a water drinking contest. It was a contest called Hold Your Wee for a Wee, and the person who could drink as much water as they could without urinating would win a free Wii video game console. They were given 8-ounce bottles of water every 15 minutes. During the contest, Jennifer Strange consumed a dangerously large amount of water, and this led to water intoxication. This condition occurs when sodium levels in the body become dangerously diluted due to excessive water intake, causing the cells to swell. Jennifer began to experience the symptoms. After the contest ended, Jennifer went home feeling ill, and she was found dead in her home later that day for a Nintendo Wii. There was massive public outcry and condemnation of the radio station and the radio station's parent company. The parent company eventually fired 10 employees connected to the contest, including the on-air personalities Maney, Roy, and Locale. There was a wrongful death lawsuit that was filed against the radio station's parent company. The FCC would refuse to renew the radio station's broadcasting license, citing a pattern of rule violations, and the water drinking contest is believed to be been a factor in that decision. This is a very rare action by the FCC. William Udermolen was an American-born artist who lived and primarily worked in London. He is best known for his self-portraits, particularly a series he created after being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. You've seen these. These self-portraits offer an unsettling visual record of the progression of his cognitive decline as the disease started affecting his brain. It's just sad to look at these and see how, Alzheimer's affects people and, other types of cognitive diseases like that. It's just heartbreaking and sad. The Oakville Blobs. The Oakville Blobs are an unexplained event that occurred in Oakville, Washington in August 1994. For approximately 3 weeks, gelatinous blobs rained down from the sky over the town, causing widespread confusion. Yeah, I would be pretty confused. This kind of sounds like the Kentucky meat shower a little bit. Residents of Oakville reported that clear, gelatinous, odorless blobs began falling from the sky, and the blobs were described as being about the size of rice grains or small jelly beans. The blobs fell multiple times over a period of 3 weeks, sometimes heavily enough to coat cars and yards. Shortly after the blobs began falling, some residents of Oakville began experiencing flu-like symptoms. In some cases, the symptoms were severe enough to cause people to be bedridden or to miss work or school. A local hospital analyzed samples of the blobs, and initially a preliminary analysis reported that the blobs contained human white blood cells and 2 types of bacteria, one of which was found in the human digestive system. This was a concerning finding. The Washington State Health Department also investigated, and their analysis found no human cells in the blob. They concluded that the blobs were likely composed of gelatinous material and possibly some unidentified organic matter. Unidentified organic matter. But they could not determine the source or composition. They also ruled out any known toxic substances. Given the event and how strange it was, and the lack of a clear explanation, some residents and online communities speculated possible military involvement, secret experiments, or even aliens. However, there's no credible evidence to suggest any of these theories. One theory suggests that the blobs might be a type of jellyfish or marine animal invertebrate that's somehow transported inland and laid down. It's raining jellyfish! However, the lack of marine components in these analyses made this unlikely. Another theory suggested a type of algae bloom, like the Kentucky meat shower. But again, the composition didn't match known algae. There is a theory that it was airplane waste. However, blue ice, as it's known to be the frozen waste from airplane toilets, is generally blue and ice-like, not gelatinous and clear. Also, the volume and duration of the Oakville event made this less likely. Despite the investigations, the nature and origin of the Oakville Blobs remain unexplained, and the official explanations are inconclusive, and the initial hospital analysis reporting that they were human white blood cells or that there were human white blood cells involved remains controversial and unofficial. Sierra Sasquatch noises are a series of audio recordings in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. Sierra Sasquatch noises are a series of audio recordings made in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California in the early 1970s. These recordings are significant in the Bigfoot Sasquatch communities because some researchers believe they capture vocalizations that could be evidence of Sasquatch language. The recordings were recorded between 1971 and 1972 by Ron Morhack and his associate Al Berry in a remote area of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The recordings feature a variety of vocalizations described as whoops, whistles, and other complex sequences of sounds that allegedly exhibit language-like patterns. Some experts have analyzed the sounds and have suggested that the vocalizations show characteristics of language. For proponents of the existence of Sasquatch and/or Bigfoot, which is, of course, all of us, right? We all want Bigfoot or a Sasquatch to exist. The Sierra sounds are considered compelling evidence because if proven to be language, it would suggest a high level of cognitive ability in the Bigfoot Sasquatch. There's also evolutionary implications. It could have a profound implications for our understanding of human evolution and the cognitive abilities of non-human primates. Could potentially require reevaluation of language development and cognitive complexity in non-human species. It's important to note that the interpretation of the Sierra sounds as Sasquatch language is not universally accepted, and some scientists suggest alternate explanations such as a hoax, misinterpretation, or that it's human imitation. HR 4796. HR 4796 is a binary star system located in the constellation Centaurus. It's approximately 235 light years away from Earth. It consists of 2 stars, a main sequence star with a stellar classification of AOV. It's larger and hotter than our sun, giving it a white hue, and a smaller red dwarf star. A is surrounded by a prominent circumstellar debris disk made of dust. Due to its appearance with the star and ring, it's sometimes nicknamed Sauron's Eye. It's a relatively young system, estimated to be about only 8 million years old. The dust ring is thought to be made of red, devolatilized cometary material. There's also evidence of a fainter, hotter dust component closer to the star. The dust ring and the formation of the dust ring suggests the possible presence of planets within the system, though none have been directly detected yet. Sort of fascinating to think that this could be, a planetary system out there that could potentially have life on it, right? The Tic Tac encounter. Tic Tac encounter refers to an event involving unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, that's what we call UFOs now, by the way, witnessed by U.S. Navy pilots in 2004. It's often cited as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the modern discussions of UAPs. In November 2004, off the coast of Southern California, approximately 100 miles out to sea, near Catalina Island, pilots and radar operators witnessed objects on the radar that were primarily oblong, white, and smooth, resembling a large Tic Tac candy, approximately 40 feet long. No visible wings, rotors, or other means of propulsion. For about 2 weeks prior to the visual encounters, the USS Princeton's radar system had been tracking unidentified aerial vehicles operating in the area. These objects were observed descending from very high altitudes to sea level in a matter of seconds, performing maneuvers that seemed beyond the capabilities of known aircraft. On November 14, 2004, Commander David Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Jim Slight were slated with the task of investigating the radar contacts during a routine training mission. As they approached the designated area, they noticed a disturbance in the water, white water, and churning, as if something was submerged just beneath the surface. Hovering about 50 feet above the churning water was the Tic Tac object. Fravor and Dagtrek observed the object performing extraordinary maneuver, hovering steadily. It hovered silently and steadily over the water. While Fravor attempted to intercept it, the Tic Tac abruptly accelerated away at an incredible speed, outmaneuvering their aircraft. It disappeared from their visual range and radar almost instantaneously. The USS Princeton then directed Fravor and Dagtrek to a cap point about 60 miles away. The Tic Tac object was already there, to their surprise, having arrived seemingly instantaneously. Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood was tasked with recording the objects using the Advanced Targeting Forward-Looking Infrared Pod on his airplane, which resulted in the now infamous FLIR-1 video, which shows the Tic Tac object in infrared, exhibiting unusual movement and lacking any discernible engine exhaust plume. Some key characteristics of the Tic Tac UAP: hypersonic speeds and instantaneous acceleration. The object demonstrated speeds and acceleration far beyond known aircraft capabilities. There was no visual propulsion, no visible engine, exhaust, wings, or control surfaces. It was capable of sudden stops, hovering, and rapid changes in direction that defied conventional physics and aerodynamics. It appeared to be able to operate in both air and water, based on the initial observation over churning water. And while it was initially detected on radar, the object seemed to have the ability to become difficult to track or visually acquire at times. It's notable that the evidence of this encounter are credible. They were highly trained U.S. Navy pilots and radar operators. And there is video and radar data that provides some level of documented evidence, unlike most anecdotal UFO or UAP sightings. Now, I think I've been pretty clear in stating that, while I believe that it would be impossible for aliens to not exist in our universe, I also don't believe that we've had I don't believe that we've had much contact with aliens. This is some pretty good evidence of alien existence. Now, do I believe that this was an alien aircraft and not something else? I would think there would be more, but this is certainly the best evidence that I have seen so far. And that is the end of part 2 of Tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Make sure that you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. I post content there. My username is AKBrews. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. I also post content there. My username is AKBrews there as well. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. And there's a super thanks button at the bottom of the YouTube toolbar. Click it if you would like to make a donation to the channel. Any money that goes to this channel any money that this channel makes is obviously going back into this channel, so we can make more exciting videos. You also support me by watching my videos, and I appreciate you watching my video. We will have part 3 up very soon, and in the meantime, please stay spooky. Please send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I appreciate you watching my videos over the last 6 months. It's been a fun ride, and I'm excited to, keep doing this for you guys. I appreciate the support that you guys have given me in your comments and your email. And I appreciate how you all have stayed spooky. Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny here, and this is the 3rd part of the 5th tier of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. You already know what we're doing here, so let's get spooky. The Demon Core. The Demon Core was the informal nickname given to a subcritical mass of plutonium intended for use in an atomic bomb during World War II as part of the Manhattan Project. It's infamous for being involved in 2 separate criticality accidents at Los Alamos National Laboratory in 1945 and 1946, which resulted in the death of 2 scientists. The Demon Core was a sphere of delta-phase plutonium weighing approximately 6.2 kilograms. Delta-phase plutonium is a specific allotrope of plutonium that is more stable at room temperature. It was intended to be used as the fissile core of the third atomic bomb, potentially for use against Japan if the war had continued, or test. It was a backup in case the other two failed. Always be prepared, right? In its normal state, the demon core was subcritical, meaning it could not sustain a nuclear chain reaction on its own. However, it was very close to criticality. Criticality accidents occur when the fissile material unintentionally becomes critical, leading to a burst of neutron and gamma radiation. The demon core was involved in two such accidents. On August 21st, 1945, Harry Dagland, a physicist, was performing criticality testing on the demon core alone in a lab late at night. And he didn't know that based on basically every horror movie ever involving scientists, you don't do this stuff alone late at night, right? He was attempting to build a neutron reflector around the core by stacking tungsten carbide bricks around it. The purpose was to see how close to criticality the core could be brought by neutron reflection. As he was placing the final brick, always the final brick, his radiation counters alarmed, indicating that the assembly was becoming supercritical. In trying to remove the brick, he accidentally dropped it into the center of the assembly. Oops. The criticality caused the core to go supercritical, emitting a burst of radiation. Dagland quickly disassembled the stack, stopping the reaction. Dagland received a lethal dose of radiation. He experienced severe radiation sickness and died 25 days later on September 15, 1945. On May 21st, 1946, Louis Slotin, a Canadian physicist, and physicist Alvin C. Graves, along with several other observers, were performing another criticality test on the demon core. This time, it was a demonstration for other scientists. Slotin was using a beryllium hemisphere, which is another type of neutron reflector, to slowly lower over the demon core. He was using a screwdriver to maintain a small gap between the hemisphere and the core, controlling the rate of neutron reflection. The screwdriver slipped, causing the beryllium hemisphere to completely close around the plutonium core. This made the core go supercritical instantly, resulting in a blue flash of light and a wave of heat. Slotin reacted quickly by reaching in and knocking the top beryllium hemisphere off of the core with his hand, stopping the chain reaction. Slotin absorbed a massive, near-lethal dose of radiation. He shielded the others in the room from potentially even worse exposure. He experienced severe radiation sickness and died 9 days later. Alvin Graves, who was standing closest to Slotin, also received a significant dose of radiation, but survived. Absolutely crazy how your screwdriver slipping or something falling into these things, that's how fragile this type of nuclear stuff is. Just a little oops can be this dangerous. Think about that. After the second accident and Slotin's death, the core became known as the demon core due to its association with these fatal accidents. These accidents led to significant changes in safety protocols for handling fissile materials, emphasizing remote manipulation and increasing shielding to protect researchers. After the second accident, the demon core was deemed too dangerous to use and was melted down to recover its plutonium for use in other weapons. The elephant's foot. Most of you should know the elephant's foot. The elephant's foot is a nickname given to a large mass of corium formed during the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. It is one of the most dangerous pieces of nuclear waste in the world, and also one of the most well-known. And a reminder of the severity of the Chernobyl accident. Corium is a lava-like radioactive material that is created in a nuclear reactor meltdown accident. It is formed when the nuclear fuel rods, reactor control rods, structural materials, and concrete reactor containment structures melt together due to the extreme heat. Yeah, that's right. A bunch of metal and concrete melting together. In the case of Chernobyl, the intense heat of the uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction caused the uranium fuel, graphite moderator, and other materials to melt and fuse. During the Chernobyl disaster, reactor number 4 experienced a catastrophic power surge and explosion. This led to a core meltdown, where the nuclear fuel overheated and melted through the reactor core and containment structure. The molten corium, a mixture of melted nuclear fuel, control rods, steel, concrete, and sand, flowed downwards due to gravity and extreme heat. It flowed towards a steam distribution corridor beneath the radiator. The molten mass eventually solidified in a basement area under the reactor known as the basement of Unit 4. It solidified into a glassy, wrinkled mass. The solidified corium took on a wrinkled, solidified appearance that, when first discovered, was said to resemble the foot of an elephant, hence the nickname. The elephant's foot was discovered in December 1986, several months after the Chernobyl accident in April of 1986. It was immediately recognized as being intensely radioactive, emitting extremely high levels of radiation. Due to the lethal radiation levels, it was impossible to approach the elephant's foot directly for extended periods. Early examinations and photographs were taken using remote control cameras and robots. One of the most famous photographs of the elephant's foot was taken in 1986 by Artur Korneyev, a Kazakhstani nuclear inspector. These photographs were historically significant, but were taken at great personal risk due to the radiation exposure. Radioactive decay has reduced the radiation levels over time. However, the elephant's foot remains highly radioactive and dangerous to approach even today. I don't know if you watched the HBO series on Chernobyl, but I highly suggest that you do. It's one of the best series that I've ever seen. I don't know, one of the best television series I've ever seen. And the way it covers the Chernobyl accident and how all of these things kept happening to make things worse. Ian Brady's briefcases. Ian Brady, along with Mira Hindley, was one of the Moors murderers responsible for the abduction, SA, and murders of several children in the UK in the 1960s. Ian Brady's briefcases refers to 2 locked briefcases that Brady insisted should not be opened until after Mira Hindley's death, and then only under specific conditions. These briefcases became a focal point in the ongoing investigation into the Moors murders, particularly concerning the unsolved case of Keith Bennett, one of the victims whose bodies was never found. Before his death in 2017, Ian Brady stipulated that 2 locked briefcases he owned should only be opened after the death of Mira Hindley, who died in 2002. He further specified that they should be opened by Jackie Malting, a former detective who had interviewed him extensively, and Terry West, the brother of Leslie Ann Downey, one of the victims. It was widely hoped that the briefcases might contain clues or information that could potentially lead to the location of Keith Bennett's body. Keith's mother, Winnie Johnson, had campaigned tirelessly for decades for her son's remains to find her son's remains before her own death in 2012, and the briefcases represented a potential last chance for closure for the family. When the briefcases were finally opened after Brady's death, their contents were described as disappointing in terms of providing immediate answers about Keith Bennett. The contents included a large volume of letters and documents written by Brady, cassette tapes likely containing recordings by Brady. There were no map or explicit directions to the location of Keith Bennett's body within the briefcase. And while there was no direct clues, investigators believe the contents, particularly the letters and tapes, might still contain indirect clues, coded messages, or insights into Brady's mindset that could potentially assist in the search for Keith Bennett. Police investigators spent considerable time reviewing and analyzing the contents of the briefcases after they were opened. They hoped to find any detail, however small, that could be relevant to the ongoing investigation. Despite the initial disappointment that the briefcase didn't contain a straightforward map, the review of the contents was intended to inform and potentially guide further searches on Satellite Moor for Keith Bennett's remains. Police emphasized that they would continue to follow any credible lead. Personally, I find it strange that they sort of humored him about this, but, I think they probably should have just said, okay, yeah, we won't open those briefcases, and then they should have seized the briefcases and just opened them and seen what was inside, and then they could have, interviewed Brady about these while he was still alive so they could get more information. But, that's just me. Ken Rex McElroy. Ken Rex McElroy was a resident of Skidmore, Missouri, who became infamous for his history of criminal behavior and intimidation in a small town during the 1970s and early 1980s. He was shot and killed in broad daylight in Skidmore on July 10, 1981, in front of numerous townspeople. Yet no one was ever charged for his murder. The case remains unsolved and shrouded in mystery and a local code of silence. Ken Rex McElroy was widely considered a bully and menace to the residents of Skidmore and the surrounding area. He was known for his intimidating behavior, theft, violence, vandalism, and his long record of arrests for various offenses, including burglary, assault, arson, cattle theft, and SA, for which he was convicted in 1961. McElroy was known for using intimidation and threats to control people and avoid consequences for his actions. People in Skidmore lived in fear of him and his potential for violence and retaliation. He essentially held Skidmore in a state of fear. He held it hostage for years. On July 10th, 1981, in daylight, on the main street of Skidmore, Missouri, McElroy was sitting in his pickup truck in the middle of town, in the presence of a large group of townspeople, estimated between 30 and 45 people. Suddenly, shots rang out, and McElroy was killed. He was shot multiple times. Many people witnessed the shooting, but no one identified the shooter or shooters to law enforcement. The Nottoway County Sheriff's Department investigated McElroy's murder. Despite the large number of witnesses present, no one cooperated with the investigation or identified who fired the shots. A wall of silence descended over Skidmore. A grand jury was convened, but due to the lack of witness testimony, no indictments were issued. The murder of Ken Rex McElroy remains unsolved. Now, to me, this is sort of an F around and find out situation, right? This guy effed around for a very long time, and then he found out. And then no one was bothered by the fact that this happened to him. It sort of seems like he got his vigilante justice, But, say what you will, I don't agree with vigilante justice, but I'm also not surprised when it happened, because these are the types of things that happen. The Bohemian Grove Conspiracy. The Bohemian Grove Conspiracy is a set of theories surrounding Bohemian Grove, a restricted 2,700-acre compound and retreat located in Monte Rio, California, owned by the Bohemian Club, a private men's club based in San Francisco. Bohemian Grove is a secluded location where the Bohemian Club holds a 2-week summer encampment every year, typically in July. The Bohemian Grove is known for its highly exclusive and wealthy membership, historically composed of prominent business leaders, politicians, artists, musicians, and other influential men, primarily from the United States. Members have included U.S. presidents, cabinet officials, corporate CEOs, media executives, and artists. The Bohemian Club and the Bohemian Grove are officially described as a place for members to escape the pressures of modern life and enjoy nature, art, music, and camaraderie. The club emphasizes hijinks and artistic expression. I mean, who doesn't love hijinks? Leaving care behind. And the club's motto is "Weaving spiders come not here," meant to signify that business deals and care, or worldly worries, should be left outside the Grove's gates. The annual encampment begins with a theatrical outdoor ritual called the Cremation of Care. This ceremony is a central point of focus for many of the conspiracy theories. It is a play-like performance involving members dressed in costumes, including robes and masks, centered around the symbolic cremation of an effigy called Care, representing worldly concern. The ceremony involves chanting, music, theatrical elements, performed in front of a large owl statue, which is a symbol of the Bohemian Club. Conspiracy theories often misinterpret the Cremation of Care ceremony as a pagan ritual, occult practice, or even a symbolic human sacrifice. They often focus on the costumes, the owl statue, and the dramatic nature of the performance to suggest sinister undertones. Some of the conspiracy theories surrounding Bohemian Grove involve secret world government / shadow government. The most prominent conspiracy theory is that the Bohemian Grove is a place where powerful men secretly meet to plan world events, manipulate global politics, and establish a new world order. Always a new world order. There are so many new world orders, and they're all coming for us, and a new one each time. The theory believes that decisions involving global policy, economics, and even wars are made at these secret gatherings. The Cremation of Care ceremony is often interpreted as evidence of occult practices, pagan worship, or even satanic rituals being conducted within the Grove. The Grove is also seen as a meeting place for a secret cabal of elites who control society from behind the scenes, furthering their own agendas and maintaining their power. Some theories focus on the idea that Bohemian Grove is a place for the wealthy and powerful to engage in immoral and decadent behavior away from public scrutiny. The Bohemian Club and its members consistently describe the Grove as a private retreat for relaxation, artistic expression, and socializing among like-minded individuals. It emphasizes the artistic and social nature of the encampment and deny any political or conspiratorial agendas. Of course, nobody who has a conspiratorial agenda admits to having a conspiratorial agenda, right? While membership is exclusive, the names of many Bohemian Club members are publicly known. The Cremation of Care is acknowledged to be a theatrical performance written and performed by club members, intended to be symbolic and humorous, not a literal occult ritual. The owl is simply the club's mascot, representing wisdom and the club's motto. Despite decades of conspiracy theories, there is no credible evidence to support claims of secret world government meetings or sinister plots being hatched at Bohemian Grove. The theories rely heavily on interpretations of the Cremation of Care ceremony and the secrecy surrounding the club. Our old buddy Alex Jones famously infiltrated Bohemian Grove in 2000 and filmed parts of the Cremation of Care ceremony. He used this footage to promote his conspiracy theories about the Grove being a site of occult rituals and secret government meetings. His sensationalized portrayal of the Grove has fueled many of the modern conspiracy news. Now look, whenever you have these secret meetings with, secret clubs with a bunch of famous people, conspiracy theories are always going to pop up. I don't know. I'm not famous. Maybe famous people prefer to be around more famous people. Maybe it's easier to relate to people who are under the same sort of scrutiny as they are. I don't know. Do I believe in rituals and shadow government and New World Order conspiracy theories? No, I don't. I don't believe people are plotting out these events like this. And, I think most people who believe that type of stuff are, generally right-wing conspiracy theorists who are looking for reasons to be conspiratorial. When you're looking for conspiracies, everything can look like a conspiracy. The Big Gray Man. The Big Gray Man is a legendary creature or phenomenon said to haunt the summit and misty slopes of Ben Macdui, the highest peak in the Cairngorm Mountains of Scotland. It's a prominent figure in Scottish folklore and mountaineering lore, often described as a large, shadowy, humanoid figure that inspires feelings of unease, dread, and even terror in those who encounter him. He's typically described as a large, vaguely human-like figure that is very tall and broad-shouldered. Its appearance is often described as gray, shadowy, or misty, blending in with the mountain mists and granite. He is not always seen clearly, but sensed or felt. Big is a key part of the description, emphasizing his imposing size compared to a normal human. Sightings and feelings associated with the big gray man are most common in misty and foggy conditions on the Ben McDewey's summit. Encounters with the big gray man are often described as sensations and feelings rather than clear visual sighting. People report a sudden overwhelming feeling of unease or dread, often accompanied by a sense of something large and unseen nearby. They report feelings of being watched or followed, even when alone by the mountain summit. They report hearing heavy footsteps or crunching sounds in the gravel or snow, as if a large figure were walking nearby, though no one is visible. In some accounts, people report fleeting glimpses of a large gray figure in the mist. In some accounts, people report fleeting glimpses of a large gray figure in the mist, but clear visual sightings are less common than the feelings of and presence and dread. Look, you guys know I love cryptids, I love spooky monsters, and I love Scotland. So I'm all for the big gray man. I didn't know about the big gray man before sort of doing this research, and I am pro big gray man. The Blackbird of Chernobyl. The Blackbird of Chernobyl is a cryptid legend said to have been sighted in Chernobyl before the 1986 nuclear. This blackbird is described in legends as a large winged humanoid figure depicted with giant wings and a dark, headless body. Sometimes it's said to have piercing red eyes in its torso where its head would normally be. Similar to the Mothman, sightings were associated with impending disaster, and some believe it was a warning of the Chernobyl catastrophe. So it's Mothman's brother. Legends claim workers in the control room saw the creature in the days leading up to the Chernobyl explosion. Those who supposedly saw it were said to experience nightmares, and in some versions, all who reported contact with it died from radiation poisoning. Now, it's important to remember that this is an internet legend and a cryptid legend, and stories of this possibly emerged decades after the disaster, kind of similar to a Slender Man type situation where it was an internet legend before it was a folklore. Some speculate sightings might be a misidentification of a large bird like a black stork, and the fear and stress of the Chernobyl event obviously created more hype for this thing. Alan J. Abrahamson. Alan J. Abrahamson is a man who attempted to fake his own murder using a weather balloon and a gun. Of course, from Florida. Alan J. Abrahamson was found dead of a gunshot wound, and it was originally believed that he was murdered. However, the police investigated and they found a receipt for a weather balloon and a receipt for some helium tanks, and eventually realized that he devised an elaborate plan involving a weather balloon and a gun. He attached a loaded gun to a weather balloon and released it. The intention was for the balloon to carry the gun far away, making it appear as if he had been murdered and his body had been disposed of, with the gun being found later in a remote location, seemingly unconnected to him. However, as part of the police investigation, they figured out his plot and they found out he wasn't murdered. Pretty wild story. Lal Bihari. Lal Bihari is an Indian farmer who, though alive, was officially designated dead between 1975 and 1994. He fought with the Indian bureaucracy for 19 years to prove that he was alive. And he would eventually found the Association of Dead People to highlight and advocate for other cases like him. Kind of wild that he had to sit there and say, hey, I am alive. Will you stop telling me that I am dead? But, whatever. That's government for you, right? Gary DeVore. Gary DeVore was a Hollywood screenwriter known for writing action films like The Raw Deal, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and The Dogs of War, which starred Christopher Walken. Great actor. Gary DeVore disappeared on June 28, 1997, when he was supposedly driving from his mother's house in Calabasas to his home in Carpinteria, California. The drive should have taken him about 90 minutes. He was driving his Ford Explorer at the time. A large-scale search was launched involving helicopters, planes, and hundreds of people, but no trace of DeVore or his vehicle was found initially. Over a year later, on July 31st, 1998, DeVore and his Ford Explorer were discovered submerged in the California Aqueduct near Palmdale, California. The vehicle was found submerged below a bridge over the aqueduct. The location of DeVore and his car were found was significantly off his expected route from Calabasas to Carpinteria. Palmdale is in the desert, far east of his likely path. The initial coroner's report listed his cause of death as undetermined. In 2010, years after his discovery, a second autopsy was performed at the request of Devore's widow. The autopsy concluded that the evidence was more consistent with homicide than accidental death. The forensic pathologist in the second autopsy stated that the decomposition of Devore's remains was not consistent with being submerged in water for over a year. There were no skid marks or signs of an accident at the location where the car went into the aqueduct, further raising suspicion. The case remains officially unsolved. While the first autopsy was inconclusive, the second autopsy pointed towards murder, and the circumstances of the vehicle being so off course and submerged with the aqueduct, along with the lack of evidence, contribute to the mystery. There's been no clear motive for his murder. Given Devore's profession as a screenwriter, theories range from professional rivalries to personal conflicts, but those are speculative. Despite the suspicions of murder, the case is cold, with no arrest or definitive answers about what happened to Gary Devore. That's one of those rare cases, again, where if it was murder, the murderer got away with it. And it seems to be a pretty wild plan to have gotten away with it there. The Vela Incident. The Vela Incident is an event that occurred on September 22, 1979 in the South Atlantic Ocean. It involved the detection of a double flash of light by a U.S. Vela satellite, which is designed to monitor nuclear explosion. The double flash is characteristic of a nuclear detonation in space. A Vela Hotel 691 satellite picked up a unique double flash of light in the South Atlantic between the Bouvet Islands and the Prince Edward. The double flash is a signature of a nuclear explosion in the atmosphere. It's characterized by an initial bright flash, followed by a slightly longer and less intense second flash. The double flash strongly suggested a low-yield nuclear test. If it was a nuclear test, the most likely culprit was considered to be apartheid-era South Africa, possibly in collaboration with Israel. Both countries were suspected of developing nuclear weapons at the time, and the location made sense. The U.S. government launched an investigation to determine if it was indeed a nuclear test. A scientific panel led by Dr. Jack Runa was convened to analyze the data. The Runa panel concluded in 1980 that while they couldn't definitively rule out a nuclear explosion, the double flash was probably not from a nuclear event. They suggested alternative explanations such as a zoo event, which would be an instrument malfunction, a micrometeoroid impact on the satellite, or sunlight glinting off debris. Despite the Runa panel's conclusion, the Vela incident remains highly debated. Many scientists and intelligent analysts believe it was a nuclear. And, to be fair, both South Africa and Israel would become nuclear powers. Letta the Doll. Letta the Doll is a supposedly haunted doll. Kerry Walton, an Australian man, claims to have found the doll in 1972 under a supposedly haunted abandoned house in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, Australia. That's a hell of a name of a town right there. He was revisiting his own town and, driven by a childhood fear of the house, decided to explore it. He found the doll under the floorboard. Kind of a weird story. Seems kind of implausible to me. Walton named the doll Letta Me Out, often shortened to Letta, because he claims that what he felt the doll was saying to him. Letta is a wooden puppet about 2 feet tall. It has human hair, which is creepy. The head can swivel, and it has a crude, unsettling face. It's dressed in simple, old clothing, and the style of the doll and its construction suggest it is a marionette. Walton and others have reported a wide range of paranormal phenomena associated with the doll, including the fact that the doll is said to move on its own. This includes changing positions, rocking, and even appearing to walk. Walton claims the doll leaves tiny little footprints. People report hearing tapping, scratching, or other unexplained noises around the doll. Other people feel a strong sense of unease, sadness, or even fear in the presence of the doll. Dogs are said to react negatively to it, barking or cowering. And we know dogs are great at judging things and people. So the origin of the doll is unknown, leading to several theories. The most commonly believed theory is that Letta is an Eastern European doll, possibly a Romanian or Gypsy puppet, and around 200 years old. The human hair and overall style support this. It suggested that it may have been made for ritualistic purposes and not as a child's toy. Some believe that the doll may have been created to house the spirit of a deceased person. Others believe the doll may have been made as a prop for a play or show. Kerry Walton still owns Letta and frequently makes appearances with the doll at paranormal conventions and on television shows. He maintains that the doll is genuinely haunted and continues to share his experience. Letta has become a minor celebrity in the paranormal world. I think that this whole story is pretty suspect. The origin story of the doll is very weird and seems way too much like a movie or too theatrical. I found this doll under the floorboards of an abandoned house. It's pretty clear that he absolutely wants this Walton guy pretty much absolutely wants people to think that this doll is haunted. and seems to enjoy the spotlight that it brings. So I'm pretty skeptical. Pheasant Island. Pheasant Island is a small, uninhabited river island located in the Bidosa River, which forms part of the border between France and Spain. It's famous for its unique and unusual political status. It's a condominium, meaning that it's jointly governed by both France and Spain. The island is situated near the point where the Bidosa River empties into the Bay of Biscay of the Atlantic Ocean. It's closer to the French bank than the Spanish bank, but still definitively within the river's course that marks the border. Pheasant Island is very small, approximately 660 feet long and 130 feet wide. It's mostly covered in grass and a few trees. There's a single monument on the island commemorating the historical events that took place there. There are no permanent residents. France and Spain alternate control of the island every 6 months. From February 1st to July 31st, the island is under Spanish sovereignty. From August 1st until January 31st, it's under French sovereignty. The change of administration is a formal ceremonial event. So this is kind of a cool story. I'm kind of impressed. Good for France and Spain for getting together and deciding that they weren't going to fight over this little piece of land and they were just going to own it together. They're just going to share it. You know, sharing is caring, right? The Mickey Mouse sex tape. The Mickey Mouse sex tape is a piece of lost media. In 1936, shortly before Walt Disney's 35th birthday, his brother Roy encouraged Disney employees to hold a surprise birthday party for him, and they agreed. Supposedly, two unknown animators decided that it would be funny if they were to animate a short of Mickey and Minnie having sex for the party. When the short was shown, Disney responded by feigning laughter before complimenting the quality of the animation and inquiring as to who had created it. Once the two animators came forward, he immediately fired them and then left the building. He supposedly ordered the destruction of all known copies of the animation thereafter, and it's unknown if any copies of the short survived yet. Now, this is sort of one of those anecdotes that no one knows if it's actually true or not. But I think if this animated short ever existed, I'm sure that you will probably never see it. And I think it would be very difficult to determine, even if it were discovered, whether it was this specific short from this story, if it were to surface. Also, damn, Walt Disney was mad. The death of Zigmund Adamski. The death of Zigmund Adamski is one of the most baffling mysteries in British history, and it has been linked to UFO lore. In June 1980, in West Yorkshire, England, Zygmunt Adamski, who was a 56-year-old Polish-born coal miner, disappeared. He left his home on June 6, 1980, to go shopping for potatoes, and he never returned. He had been in good spirits, planning his goddaughter's upcoming wedding. Adamski was reported missing, a search was conducted, but no trace of him was found for 5 days. On June 11, 1980, at approximately 3:45 p.m., Trevor Parker, the son of the owner of Tomlin's Coal Yard in Todmorden, found Adamski's body lying on top of a 10-foot-high pile of coal. Todmorden is about 20 miles from Tingley. The condition of Adamski's body and the circumstances surrounding his death were highly unusual, leading to a lot of speculation and theory. The coroner estimated that Adamski had died somewhere between 11:15 a.m. and 1:15 p.m. on the day his body was. That means he had been on top of the coal pile for only a few hours at most before being discovered. Yet no one at the busy coal yard had seen anyone place a body there. There were no indications that there was a struggle. There were no indications that Adamski had climbed the coal pile himself. There were no scuff marks on the coal, no coal dust on his shoes, and no footprints or other disturbances on the coal pile that would suggest someone else had carried him up. The official cause of death was determined to be a heart attack, but Adamski had strange elliptical burns on his neck, shoulders, and the back of his head. And these burns were covered with a mysterious, unidentifiable ointment that could not be analyzed by forensic scientists. Adamski was wearing a suit jacket, but his shirt was missing, and his trousers were improperly fastened. His shoes, while on his feet, were strangely tied. His watch and wallet were also missing. Despite having been missing for 5 days, Adamski only had 1 day's growth of beard. This suggests that he may have been alive and possibly looked after during his disappearance. Apart from the burns and the heart attack, there were no other significant injuries to suggest a fall, an assault, or any other obvious cause of death. The Adamski case has generated numerous theories. The most famous and enduring theory is a UFO abduction. This is largely fueled by the unexplained burns, the ointment, and the lack of evidence about how he got on top of the coal pile. The idea is that Adamski was abducted, experimented upon, and then returned to a location where he would be found. There are some other theories, including that Adamski was the victim of a secret weapon testing from the military, that he was part of a kidnapping or a murder, and that he somehow died, or that he died somehow accidentally. However, none of those explanations explain, how he got there, how there was no disturbance to the coal, etc., and so forth. I don't know. I don't think that this is a UFO death, but I kind of like the UFO theory. But I don't necessarily think that this is a UFO death. But it's certainly strange. I would almost wonder if someone involved in the coal field might have had something to do with his death. The Great Red Spot. The Great Red Spot is Jupiter's most famous and distinctive feature. It's a colossal, long-lived storm in the planet's southern hemisphere. It's essentially a gigantic, high-pressure anticyclone, much larger than Earth. The Great Red Spot is enormous, though it has been shrinking. At its largest historically measured size, it was wide enough to fit 2 or 3 Earths across it. Currently, it's about 1.3 times the diameter of Earth, still making it a massive storm system. The spot is typically a deep reddish brown, though the color can vary in intensity and hue, sometimes appearing more orange or even pale salmon. The Great Red Spot is generally oval-shaped, though its shape can change slightly over time, and it's located at Jupiter's southern hemisphere. The Great Red Spot rotates counterclockwise with a period of about 6 Earth days. It's believed that the wind speeds reach approximately 270 to 425 miles per hour, which are much stronger than any winds that can form on the planet Earth. The Great Red Spot has been observed continuously since at least 1830 and possibly even earlier. This makes it an incredibly long-lived feature. However, it's important to note that it is not known for sure when the spot was observed. This makes it an incredibly long-lived storm. Also, over the past century, the Great Red Spot has been noticeably shrinking in size, and its longest axis has been decreased considerably. That's cool. The EAS Zombie Hoax. The EAS Zombie Hoax, also known as the Emergency Alert System Hacking Incident, was a series of coordinated cyber attacks that targeted the emergency alert system in the United States. Hackers compromised the EAS infrastructure of several television stations, broadcasting false warnings about a zombie apocalypse. It occurred on February 11, 2013, and the attacks primarily affected stations in Great Falls, Montana, Marquette, Michigan, and Kalispell, Montana. It also affected stations in Albuquerque, New Mexico, although this station was testing its equipment at the time and the test message got looped incorrectly. The hacked EAS message varied slightly between stations, but the core message was consistent: a warning of a zombie outbreak. The audio messages typically stated that dead bodies were rising from the graves and attacking the living. Some messages included instructions not to approach or engage with the bodies because they were considered extremely dangerous. The alerts were often accompanied by the standard EAS warning tones and visual crawl. The hackers exploited a vulnerability in the EAS equipment used by the affected station. Specifically, they targeted the digital alert systems, emergency alert system encoders, decoders.
Civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. Follow the messages on screen that will be updated as information becomes available. Do not attempt to approach or apprehend these bodies as they are considered extremely dangerous. I repeat, civil authorities in your area have reported that the bodies of the dead are rising from their graves and attacking the living. This warning applies to all areas receiving this broadcast. Tune in to 9:20 a.m. to get updated information in the event that you are separated from your television or if electrical service is interrupted.
These devices are used by broadcasters to receive and relay EAS messages. The key to the attack was that the affected stations had failed to change the default factory passwords on their EAS device. This allowed the hackers to easily gain remote access to the system. Once they had access, the hackers were able to inject their own audio messages into the broadcast stream, overriding the regular programming. I don't even think, this is sort of unbelievable, right? They didn't change their passwords. The first thing that you're absolutely supposed to do, they left their default passwords on this very critical, important piece of, notification system. They shouldn't even call these people hackers because they didn't really do any hacking, did they? They just sort of figured out how inept the people running these systems were. I don't know. It's pretty funny. I love zombies. Who doesn't love zombies and zombie apocalypse stuff? And it's pretty funny that they were able to do that. I guess a lot of people were confused and scared and mad. I don't know what I would think. I think if I saw on TV a claim that the zombie apocalypse had started, I would like to think I wouldn't necessarily believe it and would, check the internet before I freaked out. And 2013 was, recent enough that you should have been able to check Twitter or Facebook to find out if there was the zombie apocalypse occurring, right? So, But still, pretty wild, pretty crazy that the people in charge of those systems were that incompetent. The King Kong Spider Pit Scene. The King Kong Spider Pit Scene is another piece of lost media. It's from the original 1933 King Kong, and it's one of the most famous and sought-after pieces of lost film footage in cinema history. It's a scene that was cut from the film before its release, and despite numerous attempts to find it, only stills and production notes remain to give a sense of what it was like. The Spider Pit sequence was intended to occur after Kong shakes several sailors off a log bridge into a ravine. In the cut sequence, the surviving sailors fall into the ravine and land in a pit at the bottom. There they are attacked by a terrifying array of giant creatures, including giant spiders, crab-like creatures, so also kind of spider, tentacled creature, and lizard-like creature. The scene was filmed using stop-motion animation by Willis O'Brien, who was the special effects master behind King Kong. It was intended to be a horrifying and suspenseful sequence showing the gruesome fate of the sailors who pursued Kong. There are several reasons given for the scene's removal, all based on accounts from the filmmakers and preview audience. The most common explanation is that the scene was simply too horrific for audiences of the time. Preview audiences reportedly reacted very negatively to the violence and gruesome nature of the creatures and the attacks. Some accounts claim people screamed, fainted, or even ran out of the theater. Another reason given is the scene slowed down the film's pacing. After the exciting log bridge sequence, the Spider Pit scene was seen as a digression that interrupted the momentum of Kong's rampage on Skull Island. The Spider Pit scene has become a holy grail for film historians and fans of King Kong. Despite extensive searches, no surviving film elements of the scene have ever been found. The most likely scenario is that the original negative and any prints of the scene were destroyed shortly after the film's release. Studio practices at the time often involved discarding cut footage to save space and reuse the film stock. Over the years, there have been numerous rumors and hoaxes claiming that the footage has been found, although none of these have been proven to be true. There's a slim possibility that a print of the scene might exist in a private collection, but this is considered highly unlikely. The WKCR hacking incident. The WKCR hacking incident occurred on August 14, 1977, and it's a unique event in radio history. It wasn't a physical hijacking of the station, but rather an unauthorized rogue broadcast that interrupted the regular programming of WKCR-FM, Columbia University's student-run radio station. WKCR is a non-commercial student-run radio station based at Columbia University in New York City. It's known for its diverse and often experimental programming, like most college radio stations, right? The incident occurred on the evening of Sunday, August 14th, 1977, during the station's regular classical music programming. At approximately 8:20 p.m., the regular broadcast was abruptly interrupted by an unauthorized transmission. The hijacking broadcast consisted of a rambling, disjointed, and often nonsensical monologue delivered by a male voice. The speech was laced with profanity, religious and philosophical ramblings, and political statements. The speaker identified himself as John the Divine, or sometimes just John. Key themes of the message included claims of being a messenger from God or a divine being, criticism of the U.S. government, the CIA, and other institutions, references to conspiracy theories and secret society, announcements of impending doom or apocalyptic events. Sounds like most baby boomers' Facebook page, right? Or their Facebook feeds, I guess. Not all baby boomers are into this stuff. It's believed that the hijacker used a relatively powerful transmitter, likely located somewhere in the vicinity of Columbia University. The signal outpowered WKCR's own signal, effectively taking over the 89.9 FM frequency. Because it was overpowering the signal, rather than an infiltration of the station's equipment, the broadcast staff at WKCR were powerless to stop it immediately. This reminds me a lot of the Max Headroom incident, which we had talked about earlier. And I think the answer to who was responsible for this is kind of a similar group, right? If you recall the Max Headroom incident, a big part of the discussion about that is there were people that just sort of like doing these kind of hacks. And because they could do it, they would do it. It seems that a group of people in New York found out that they were able to do this, and they decided to go ahead and do it and, put something bizarre on the air. The Marozi. The Marozi, also known as the spotted lion, is a cryptid. And we love cryptids. Said to inhabit the highlands of East Africa, particularly Kenya. The Marozi is typically described as resembling a lion, but with distinct differences. It's generally reported to be smaller than a typical African lion, closer to size of a large leopard or a lion. The most defining characteristic is the presence of spots, similar to a leopard's, on its coat. These spots are often described as being faint or faded, particularly in an adult animal. The base coat color is typically described as a light tawny or grayish color, not the bright golden yellow of a typical lion. Male Marozis are sometimes described as having a very short, sparse mane, much less developed than a typical lion's mane, or no mane at all. The Marozi is reportedly found in higher altitude areas, such as forests and mountainous regions, rather than the open savannas where lions are typically found. The evidence of Marozi's existence are primarily anecdotal, based on sightings and reports from local people and, in a few cases, European hunters and explorers. Indigenous communities in East Africa have long-standing traditions and stories about a spotted lion that lives in the mountains. There are theories about the Marozi, right? The first is that it's an undiscovered species or subspecies, some sort of undiscovered lion or type of lion that has adapted to a higher altitude or forested environment. Certainly a cool idea, but I think probably unlikely. Another idea is that it's a lion-leopard hybrid, a liguar or a leopard. They have been able to breed lions and leopards in captivity. However, those are generally found to be infertile. So it's unlikely that those animals breeding would be able to create a species that is able to live in these areas. Another theory is it's just misidentification. People misidentifying leopards or lions or seeing something on a lion that could be dirt or something else explained. I think it's probably most likely that these are misidentifications of other animals, though I love the idea of some sort of lion that we don't know about running around, love it. Love big cats, love cryptids. I'm all here for the cryptid lion. I want it to be real. The Mokele Mbebe. The Mokele Mbebe is another cryptid that is said to inhabit the Congo River basin of Central Africa. It is a famous and enduring cryptid, described as a large, long-necked aquatic or semi-aquatic reptile and frequently compared to a sauropod dinosaur. It's described to be very large, ranging from the size of an elephant to considerably larger, with a long neck compared to that of a swan or a giraffe, but thicker, a relatively small head, and a long, powerful tail, as well as 4 short, stout legs like an elephant or rhinoceros. Now, again, there are a lot of theories about this animal, and one of the most sensational is that this is a surviving dinosaur. I think it's very unlikely that there are surviving dinosaurs in Africa, but I would like that to be true. I think that would be cool if it were true. Another and the more likely theory is these are just, misidentified animals. Someone sees the back end of an elephant or a hippo and some tree branches or something, and the brain sort of puts it together as some sort of dinosaur-like creature. Again, I would love for this to be a cryptid or a monster or a dinosaur, but I think it's most likely a misidentification. The Falcon Lake Incident. The Falcon Lake Incident, which occurred on May 20th, 1967 near Falcon Lake in Manitoba, Canada, is one of the most well-documented UFO cases in history. It involved a direct physical encounter with an alleged unidentified flying object, a UFO or a UAP, leaving the witness with physical injuries and lasting effects. Unlike many UFO reports that rely solely on anecdotal witness testimony, the Falcon Lake case had physical evidence, medical reports, and a government investigation. Stephen McCulloch was a Polish immigrant and amateur geologist. He often prospected for minerals in the wilderness around Falcon Lake. McCulloch was considered a reliable and honest individual with no history of mental illness or fabrication. On May 20th, 1967, McCulloch was prospecting in White Shell Provincial Park near Falcon Lake. He was examining a quartz vein when the incident occurred. He first observed 2 cigar-shaped objects descending from the sky. One object landed on a flat rock about 160 feet away, while the other hovered briefly before flying off. According to McCulloch, the landed object changed shape, becoming more disc-like. It glowed a reddish color and had a dome on top. McCulloch spent about a half an hour sketching the object, noting details like its smooth metallic surface and various lights. He heard whirring noises and a hissing noise coming from the object. He also noticed a strong smell of sulfur. A door opened on the side of the object, revealing a brightly lit interior. McCulloch heard voices coming from inside, but couldn't make out any of the words. McCulloch approached the object and called out, first in English, then in several other languages he knew, including Russian, Polish, and German. He received no response. Cautiously, McCulloch peered inside the open doorway. He saw a panel of flashing lights and beams of light, but no occupant. As McCulloch reached out to touch the object's surface, the object suddenly rotated, and a grid-like exhaust vent on its side emitted a blast of hot gas. The blast set McCulloch's shirt and undershirt on fire. He ripped off the burning clothing and was thrown back. He suffered immediate burns to his chest and abdomen in a grid-like pattern corresponding to the vent. The object then closed its door and ascended rapidly, leaving a swirling cloud of air and a strong smell of sulfur. McCulloch felt nauseous immediately, and he experienced a severe headache and began vomiting. He stumbled through the woods back to his motel, disoriented and in pain. He sought medical attention, first in Falcon Lake and later in Winnipeg. Doctors documented his burns, which were consistent with his story, a grid-like pattern of first and second-degree burns. He also suffered from nausea, headaches, diarrhea, weight loss, and blackouts for weeks after the incident. McCulloch's burned shirt and undershirt were recovered and analyzed. The landing site showed evidence of a disturbance, a circular area about 15 feet in diameter where vegetation had been flattened or removed. Elevated radiation readings were found at the landing site, particularly in a crevice in the rock. Samples of soil and McCulloch's clothing also showed elevated levels of radiation, and a piece of melted, highly radioactive metal was later found wedged in the rock fissure. This event was investigated by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Royal Canadian Air Force. The U.S. Air Force also investigated the case. However, neither entity has released definitive findings about what happened. Now, I believe that this is probably some sort of spacecraft, some sort of experimental spacecraft that was probably being used by Canada, United States, Russia, one of those. Some sort of piece of secret military aircraft or some sort of satellite or drone even. I think that's probably the most likely explanation for this. Brandon Swanson. Brandon Swanson is a missing person, an unexplained missing person case from Minnesota. On May 14th, 2008, Brandon Swanson, who was a 19-year-old student at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Canby, Minnesota, disappeared. He was described as responsible, friendly, and close to his family. Brandon was celebrating the end of spring semester with his friends in the town of Canby. He had been drinking, but witnesses said that he did not appear overly intoxicated. Around midnight, Brandon left Canby to drive back to his home in Marshall, Minnesota, a drive of about 30 miles. Around 1:54 a.m., Brandon called his parents, Annette and Brian Swanson. He told them that he had driven his car into a ditch and needed them to come pick him up. He said he was near the town of Lind, which is southwest of Marshall. Brian Swanson drove to Lind to find him, while Annette stayed on the phone with him. They kept in constant communication. Brandon described walking towards what he thought were the lights of Lind, but he couldn't reach them. He described walking through fields, hearing running water. He was increasingly confused and disoriented. Approximately 2:30 a.m., after about 47 minutes on the phone with his mother, Brandon suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit!" The phone call then abruptly ended. Annette Swanson repeatedly tried to call Brandon back, but the calls went straight to voicemail. He was never heard from again. Law enforcement, volunteers, and search dogs conducted extensive searches of the area where Brandon was believed to have gone missing. The searches were focused on areas around Lind as well as other towns along Brandon's possible route. The next day, Brandon's car was found in a ditch near the town of Taunton, not Lind. Taunton is northwest of Marshall, in the opposite direction. The discovery significantly expanded the search area and deepened the mystery. The car was on a gravel road along a field access road. The Yellow Medicine River flows near where Brandon's car was found. The river was high and fast-moving at the time of his disappearance. Initial theories focus on the possibility that Brandon had fallen into the river and drowned, but extensive searches of the river yielded no results. Cell phone records confirmed that Brandon's last call originated from the vicinity of Taunton, not Lind. This showed that he was significantly off course from his intended route. There was no evidence of foul play found in or around Brandon's car. Nothing was missing, and there were no signs of a struggle. Search dogs tracked Brandon's scent from about 3 miles along a gravel road, heading north and west from his car, then along a field edge to a farm. The scent trail ended at the edge of the Yellow Medicine River, but at a different location than initially suspected. Now, personally, I think it's pretty likely that he was confused, disoriented, and I think he walked into the river. And I think, unfortunately, he drowned there. And that's really sad. It's really sad that this happened to him, and it's really sad that his parents had to endure that. Ray Rivera. Ray Rivera is a suspicious death case. A man who was found dead in a Baltimore hotel with strange circumstances surrounding his death. Ray Rivera had recently married Allison Jones, and they had moved to Baltimore from California a few months before his death. He was described by friends and family as an intelligent, ambitious, outgoing, and generally happy person. He had no known history of mental illness or substance abuse. On May 16, 2006, Ray and Allison spent the evening at home. A friend of Allison's, Claudia, was staying with them. Around 6:30 p.m., Ray received a phone call that seemed to agitate him. The call came through the Stansberry & Associates switchboard, making it impossible to trace. The identity of the caller and the content of the conversation are unknown. Immediately after the phone call, Ray rushed out of the house, seemingly in a hurry without explanation of where he was going. This was highly unusual of him. This was the last time anyone was known to have seen him alive. Allison reported Ray missing the next day after he failed to return home or contact. Ray's car was found in a parking lot near the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore, a few blocks from his workplace. 8 days after his disappearance, Ray's body was discovered inside a closed, unused conference room on a lower level of the Belvedere Hotel. The room was accessible through a hole in the roof. The hole in the roof was the strangest part of the scene. It appeared that Ray had fallen or jumped through the roof, landing on the floor below. The hole was relatively small and irregularly shaped. Ray's injuries were extensive and severe, including multiple broken bones, a collapsed lung, and head trauma. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as undetermined due to the unusual circumstance. There are a lot of theories about what happened to Ray, although none of them seemed to fit perfectly. Police initially believed that this was a self-unaliving, and they suggested that Ray jumped from the roof of the Belvedere. However, this theory has problems. The location of the hole and the position of Ray's body made it extremely difficult for Ray to have jumped from the main roof of the hotel and landed where he did. The trajectory would have required a running jump and significant horizontal distance, which was not feasible given the surrounding structure. Also, he left no unaliving note, and there was no indication in his behavior or personal life that he wanted to unalive himself. Another possibility is that Ray accidentally fell through the roof while exploring the building. Access to the roof was restricted, however, and it's unclear why Ray would have been up there in the first place. There are also theories that Ray may have been murdered. Now, personally, I believe that this might have been an urban exploration issue, or it also could have been possible that he was just sort of wandering, whether he was intoxicated or other reasons, and had a fall. I believe the fall theory. I understand that there's some suggestions that it wasn't feasible, but I think you would be surprised at how of the ways that people find to hurt themselves. The Highway of Tears. The Highway of Tears is a 450-mile stretch of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in British Columbia, Canada. It has become infamous for the extraordinary high number of women, mostly indigenous, who have gone missing or have been murdered along this route since 1970. It is called the Highway of Tears to be an evocative symbol of the systemic violence against indigenous women and girls in Canada, a crisis that extends far beyond this highway and also extends to the United States. Missing and murdered indigenous women are a problem in North America. They are very vulnerable people, and there is just such a high rate of indigenous women who are murdered, and people do not seem to care. I did a video on active serial killers in the United States, and I discussed the Highway of Tears in it, and you should check that out if you would like to see a longer discussion of this issue. The Brabant Killer. The Brabant Killers were a group of violent criminals who carried out a series of brutal and seemingly random attacks in Belgium between 1982 and 1985. Their crimes shocked the nation, and the case remains one of Europe's most notorious unsolved mysteries. The seemingly random nature of the attacks, the extreme violence used, and the lack of clear motive have made the case particularly baffling. The crimes were carried out between 1982 and 1985. The crimes are generally classified into two waves. The 1982 to 1983, which was the first wave, was a series of robberies and burglaries with increasing violence, targeting gun shops, restaurants, and grocery stores. These were less deadly than the later attack. The second wave occurred in 1985 and involved massacres at supermarkets. On November 9th, 1985, 8 people were killed in one of these attacks, which was the most people killed in one of these attacks. Throughout their reign of terror, 28 people were killed and over 40 injured. No one knows who's responsible for these attacks, but there are a lot of theories. Personally, I believe that this is terrorism. I think this is likely classified as terrorism. And the question is, are they Belgian domestic terrorists or are they foreign terrorists? And I think that it's questionable, unknown, about who is involved. But I think that this is a pretty good example of terrorism. The abduction of Violet Ripken. Violet Ripken, the mother of Cal Ripken Jr., was abducted in a bizarre and unresolved kidnapping case that occurred in 2012. The perpetrator has never been identified, and the motive remains unclear. The abduction happened on July 24, 2012. It occurred in Aberdeen, Maryland, which is a suburb of Baltimore. Violet Ripken was 74 years old at the time. It occurred approximately between 7 and 8 a.m. Violet was abducted at gunpoint from her home. A man wearing a camouflage jacket and glasses approached her in her garage, forced her into her 1998 Lincoln Town Car, and drove away. There was never a ransom demand made, which is highly unusual in a kidnapping case. The next day, July 25, 2012, approximately 6:15 a.m., Violet Ripken was found bound but alive in the backseat of her own car, which had been parked near her home in Aberdeen. She was shaken but physically unharmed. She was able to provide a description of her abductor to the police. The Aberdeen Police Department, along with the FBI, launched a large-scale investigation, and they released a composite sketch of the suspect based on Violet Ripken's description. The suspect was described as a white male, possibly in his late 30s or early 40s, with glasses and a camouflage jacket. Investigators pursued numerous leads, including reviewing surveillance footage from the businesses and residents in the area where Violet Ripken was found and where she had been driven. However, there have been no solid leads. This case has gone cold and no arrests have ever been made. There are a few theories about what would have happened. One is that this was just a case of mistaken identity, that the perpetrator meant to abduct someone else and ended up abducting Violet. Another is that they intended to harass the Ripken family. Cal Ripken Jr. is one of the most famous baseball players of all time, and maybe that was somehow involved. But then that doesn't explain why there was no ransom ever demanded or why she was returned so quickly. North Korean ghost ships. North Korean ghost ships are derelict fishing vessels, often small and wooden, that wash ashore in Japan and other surrounding areas, typically containing the remains of their North Korean crew. They are a grim, recurring phenomenon. These are small, dilapidated fishing boats, usually old wooden boats ill-equipped for long voyages or rough seas. They lack modern navigation equipment, communication systems, and safety gear. The most tragic aspect of these boats is that they often contain the remains of their crews who have died from starvation, dehydration, exposure, or a combination of these factors. Sometimes only skeletons remain. It's believed that these exist because the North Korean government under Kim Jong-un has placed increasing pressure on the fishing industry to boost catches as a source of food and foreign currency. This pressure pushes fishermen to venture further out into the Sea of Japan, often beyond their capability. The boats likely set out from North Korean ports, likely with ambitious fishing targets. They encounter problems at sea, engine failure, running out of fuel, getting caught in storms, or simply getting lost during the poor navigation. Unable to return to port, the boats drift at the mercy of the currents and the winds. The crew runs out of food and fresh water, and the crew succumb to the elements, starvation, and dehydration. This is pretty horrifying. Pretty horrifying and a stark reminder of the humanitarian crisis that is happening in North Korea. The Valley of Headless Men. The Valley of Headless Men, more formally known as the Nahanni National Park Reserve in Canada's Northwest Territory, has earned its nickname due to a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances, particularly in the early 20th century. The park is located in the southwest part of the Northwest Territories, and it's characterized by deep canyons, towering waterfalls, hot springs, and dense forests. It's incredibly remote and difficult to access. The Valley of Headless Men moniker primarily stems from a few key incidents and a broader sense of mystery. The most famous case, the brothers Willie and Frank McLeod set out to prospect for gold in Nahanni Valley. They disappeared and their headless bodies were later found near a river. The circumstances were suspicious, leading to speculation about murder, possibly by rival prospectors or something more sinister. Martin Jorgensen was also found dead. He was another prospect, also reportedly headless. Over the years, there have been other reports of people disappearing in the Nahanni Valley, some of them never found, some found dead under mysterious circumstances. Now, there are a lot of theories about what's going on here, but the likelihood is these disappearances are likely because of the harsh environment and the dangers of being in the remote wilderness. And, there's there've been a couple instances of people been found headless, but there's, reasons about why that could have happened. Animals, and of course there's also foul play, so that doesn't mean that there is necessarily some sort of paranormal aspect involved here. Kap Dwa. Kap Dwa is a purported two-headed Patagonian giant said to be over 12 feet tall, whose mummified remains have been displayed as a sideshow attraction. As the story goes, at some point around 1673, although some accounts place it in the early 1900s, a giant with two heads was allegedly captured by Spanish sailors in Patagonia. The giant, named Kap Dwa, was reportedly captive, killed while trying to escape, and then mummified. The mummified remains supposedly traveled through various hands, eventually ending up in sideshow and oddity collections, primarily in the UK and the US. Kap Dwa is consistently described as being extremely tall, with two distinct heads, each with its own set of teeth and, presumably, brains. Now, there's no credible evidence to support the existence of Kap Dwa as a genuine two-headed giant, and no skeletal remains have ever been available for independent scientific examination. This is most likely a circus or sideshow creation that was exhibited to, at the time, kind of like the Fiji mermaid and other types of hoaxes that were created to be fascinating. Charles Morgan. The case of Charles Morgan is a cold case from Arizona involving a mysterious death, alleged organized crime connections, and a series of strange phone calls. It remains unsolved to this day. Charles Morgan, who went by Chuck, was a Tucson, Arizona escrow company owner in the 1970s. He was married to Ruth Morgan and had 2 daughters. In March 1977, he vanished from his home for 3 days. He reappeared bound and gagged with a plastic handcuff on one wrist and a rope around his neck. He claimed he'd been kidnapped. He told his wife a story about being forced to inhale a hallucinogenic drug and having a secret agent identity revealed to him. He refused to go to the police. He could only communicate by writing, claiming his throat had been sprayed with a substance that prevented him from speaking. A few months later, in May and June 1977, Morgan disappeared again, this time after telling his wife he was going to meet someone to sell some bulletproof vests. Ruth Morgan began receiving strange phone calls. A woman identifying herself only as Green Eyes claimed to have information about her husband's whereabouts. Several days after the second disappearance, Morgan's body was found in a remote desert area west of Tucson. He'd been shot in the back of the head. The scene was filled with strange and seemingly staged clues. Morgan was wearing a bulletproof vest. A $2 bill was clipped to his underwear, with 7 Spanish names written on it, along with a map and coordinates and references to verses from the Book of Revelation. He was wearing someone else's prescription sunglasses. A bag near his body contained various weapons, ammunition, knives, and rope. His car was found nearby with the keys in the ignition and a piece of paper with a map inside. The map was supposedly marked to indicate a spot where his body was. One of Chuck Morgan's teeth was also found in the car. The case was initially ruled a self-unaliving. This was widely disputed given the gunshot wound to the back of the head and the staged scene. It would be later reopened as a homicide, but no one has ever been charged. The investigation has been hammered by a lack of forensic evidence and the unusual nature of the clues. The most prominent theory is that Morgan was involved in money laundering or other illegal activities with organized crime, possibly the mafia, and he may have been killed after trying to back out or becoming a liability. And the staged scene could have been a message to others. There are other theories too, including a government conspiracy or a double life, although I think that the organized crime theory is a double life theory. I don't know, this kind of sounds like Saul to me. This kind of sounds like something Saul from Better Call Saul would have wound up getting involved in, right? I don't know. It's a pretty strange story. I think it's probably likely that there were some people involved and all this strange stuff that was sort of involved seemed to be to create a bunch of noise to cause a bunch of weirdness in the investigation. Catatumbo lightning. Catatumbo lightning is a atmospheric phenomenon that occurs over the mouth of the Catatumbo River where it empties into Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela. It is characterized by near constant intense lightning activity, making it one of the most electrically active places on Earth. The lightning occurs typically 140 to 260 nights per year, with storms lasting for as long as 10 hours at a time. The lightning is incredibly intense, with thousands of strikes per hour during its peak activity. The lightning can appear in various colors, including red, orange, purple, and white, depending on the atmospheric conditions and the presence of dust and humidity. And the lightning is remarkably consistent, occurring in roughly the same location at roughly the same time of night, usually starting about an hour after dusk. The reasons for this lightning are still the subject of ongoing research, but the leading theory involves a combination of factors. First, the Andes Mountains surrounding the Lake Maracaibo force warm, moist air from the Caribbean Sea to rise rapidly. This is a common trigger for thunderstorms. The marshlands under the Catatumbo River are rich in organic matter which decompose and release large amounts of methane gas. The methane plays a role in increasing electrical conductivity of the air, making it more prone to lightning. Sea air and winds, as well as cold air from the mountains, interacts with the warm air, creating strong updrafts and downdrafts essential for thunderstorm formation. This seems pretty cool. I would like to see it someday. Finally, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. The Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Now, I actually did a whole video on the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. In September 1944, residents reported experiencing strange odors followed by symptoms like nausea, vomiting, weakness, and partial paralysis. Some victims reported seeing a mysterious figure described in various ways, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a woman dressed as a man. The alleged attacker was said to have used some kind of gas or spray. This is a weird story. Like I said, I did a whole other video on this that you can go watch, and it's definitely a weird unsolved mystery. And go watch my video on it. Why not? You spent this much time with me. Spend some more. And that's it. That is tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg chart by Juan the Pickle. And, thank you. It's been a fun 6 months. I will start working on tier 6. I promise we'll get back to working on this iceberg series, and we're going to finish it up. Make sure that you are following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBruce. Make sure that you're following me on Twitter. Also, my username is AKBrews there as well. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. Which of these mysteries do you like? Do you have any theories on these mysteries? Leave a comment. Tell me about it. Let's talk about it. There is a super thanks button in the YouTube toolbar. If you would like to make a donation to the channel, go ahead, click that, make a donation. It would be appreciated. Any money that this channel makes is going back into the channel so we can do bigger and better things, upgrade equipment, shoot better videos, and stuff like that. You also support me, though, by watching my videos and sharing my videos. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate that you're subscribed to this channel and that you like and share these videos with people. So it means a lot to me. And as always, please stay